there will be no real non-controlled currency in the world.
We're coming for you, banks.
Increasing the block size to 32 megabytes right now. What would be the top 5 arguments that would get hurled against me?
That's a good one.
There are a few that the big blockers got right.
Ching, like all these coins splash into the wallets of all the winners. I love that.
There's a new threat out there. It's crypto.
All right, hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast. Following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency, this is episode number 134, Pseudonymous, Advocacy, and XNO, which is Nano, featuring Milan, formerly Mira Hurley. We'll get into the details of all that for our audience who's unaware. Today is Monday, the 4th of November, 2024. The BCH price is $328.20 for 100 megasats, which is down. 1 BTC sat is 205 BCH sats, so we're getting wrecked on the ratio, back under 200 unluckily, and 1 ETH by 738.7 megasats. When I have a guest like this, I usually put the price of their coin of choice, but I forgot. So for the record, Nano is 75 cents USD. It's rank number 324 out of apparently 9,913 active cryptocurrencies on CoinMarketCap. And let's have a look at the recent price action. It's a little bit down, but so is the rest of the market. So, you know, not really shocking anyone with that there. Do you have any thoughts about the market quickly? Are you pumping your bags, you know?
No. I try to ignore the market in the short term, and you know, I'm in this for the long term, which is the honest answer, but also very convenient when the price has been going down. So I try not to look at it too much.
Yeah, you and me both, man. You and me both. All right, one quick announcement as well too. We've got our meme competition. It has been running, and we've already off to a good start with Paul has made a video explaining how to launch your own cash token. There's a link on the slide, and it's also in the Google Drive link with all the rules and everything like that. There's 2 BCH in prizes, and you could at the moment literally win just by following this guide for 5 minutes and creating a cash token and then submitting it. You would be the first entrant and therefore in prime position to win. But obviously there's more to it, and I expect the competition to ramp up. But you could gamble and get paid, you know, at an insane hourly rate if you win a whole BCH for 5 minutes work. So get cracking on your memes. And so we've had some good image submissions actually, but we're looking for our first cash token submission. Get onto that. Okay, our guest today, Milan, is formerly known as Mira Hurley. Quite a dichotomy of public presentations here for people that are watching the live stream. Is the developer and I guess founder and maybe, I don't know, CEO, CTO, of NanoGPT, and a very strong Nano advocate. Welcome to the show, Milan. How did you get into Bitcoin?
Thank you. I got into Bitcoin in 2012, so fairly early. But to be fair, like getting into it, I think back then it wasn't as serious. It was just this fun thing to do. But yeah, got into it like way back in the day, and have stuck around like more or less for the past, what is it now, 12 years already, I guess, with like waves of getting more and less interested over time, which I guess we all have to an extent. But yeah, my origin story is just, it was a fun way to transfer value to friends over the internet. And it was this sort of funny magic internet money, right, at the time. And then, you know, just got more and more interested and never could really look at money the same way again, I guess is the best way to describe it.
Do you read the white paper? Or 2012, there wasn't too much. There's Bitcoin Talk, there was the white paper, bit of chat.
Yeah, that's exactly literally it. It was read the white paper, join the Bitcoin Talk forums, lurk mostly. I don't think I posted much. set up your own node, which was way more of a hassle back then. Try to do some mining. Yeah, the full works. It's all gotten so much easier and so much more content. And back then it was just just a funny thing to do.
And was there any particular part of it that drew you in? You know, some people really like the hardware and the mining side. Some people like the economics. Some people like the tech. Some people like the sort of libertarian political philosophy. Some people are just tinkerers. Which element for you?
So I would say it was not the hardware and the sort of mining, because to my shame, I actively recommended against people buying miners. Like I had a good friend who was like, I think I'll buy one of these miners. And back then they were like $300 or something. And he would mine like a Bitcoin every few days or something. I was like, dude, I don't think it's going to be that valuable. So that was my worst prediction ever. I genuinely thought like, okay, it's just this funny money. And I hadn't looked into it too deeply back then. It was just, okay, you can send money on the internet without having to pay like PayPal fees. It was only after, I think around 2014-ish, where I started looking more deeply into also the economics of it. But my original first use case was just transferring money to friends that I played this online game with. And, we needed to sort of spread our winnings between the team. And PayPal was expensive and slow and not available in every country, I think, that we wanted to transfer to. So, Bitcoin was a fun solution to try with. So that was my original way of getting into it. I can go more into the history of how that developed over time, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm keen to hear. I'm keen to hear about that. But firstly, do you know A Fifth of Gaming? Have you heard about that? We've been shilling it a bit on the show. What game were you playing in 2012?
Battle Dawn. It's this sort of yeah. It's not a very well-known game. It's like an online strategy game that just keeps on going, like one turn every hour. So it's insanely intense. It keeps going during the night as well.
So if you're offline, you just get wrecked, or people like team up in clans and then rotate?
Yeah, it's in clans, it's in teams, and then you get called during the night, or you wake up others like you're under attack. It's a super stressful game, man. It was crazy.
Not a game for people with like jobs or girlfriends or anything like that, right?
Yeah, my girlfriend was not the biggest fan of this game.
I can imagine. Well, just the reason I say it is because so we've got A Fifth of Gaming. I've retweeted a bunch, so you might have seen it there, which is David Shattuck, who's going to be actually on the next episode of the show, and he's made a site for exactly this, for BCH powered gaming, right? So you can do it. Social games was how it started, where it's just scheduling software basically, so you can get everyone different time zones. This is the time we're all going to show up and play whatever on Skype, right? But then as things have gone along, he's made like tournament mode, so you can buy in like a poker tournament in BCH, and then there's an automatic, the more people that buy in, the more the prize distribution changes to reflect that. And then you play the games, you automatically can set I won or I lost, with an admin to adjudicate any disputes, and then at the end it just all automatically pays out to whoever won. And anyway, it's been super cool. We've had tons of fun with it, and it sounds like kind of might be up your alley to look into then.
Oh, sounds fun. Yeah. This was not as sophisticated. This was just play the game and then do a transfer, afterwards to pay someone that helped me or something to that effect.
Do you still game these days?
No, honestly, like not at all. First of all, I'm away from home for like the entire past year pretty much. So all I have is my laptop, and I don't know, like gaming on a laptop kind of sucks. Like often I don't even have a mouse. So like, yeah. But no, normally if I do game nowadays, it's Age of Empires 2, which is also this very old school game, but not so much anymore.
Yeah. No, you and me both. It's hard to find the time, to be honest. Although I do play AFOG at least once a month with those guys. But yeah, it's hard to find the time. Okay, so moving on. So you picked up some crypto, some Bitcoin back in the day. You played around with it a bit, read the white paper, kind of kept an eye on it. Then what happened?
So around 16, 17, I guess, when the block size wars happened. I was kind of very much on the fence, because I genuinely saw Bitcoin as a way that we could have like decentralized transactions that anyone can do, anywhere in the world, and I was very excited about that part. But I also really understood the point of the digital gold advocates. Like, I think it is important to be a store of value. So I kind of saw both sides. But then I also kind of saw the arguments against both as being very legitimate. Like, I could see the small blockers argument, like, you don't want to have these big blocks. Anyone should be able to run a node. But so I kind of got a bit disillusioned, mostly because I could really strongly agree with both of the against arguments. So I kind of got a bit, demotivated about crypto, I guess, because I was like, okay, this is just not going to work. Neither one is right. They're actually, well, they're both right, but mostly in their criticism. So I kind of got less interested in Bitcoin and crypto as a whole. And then I got back into it with, to my shame, IOTA or Yoda, I don't know what you call it, Yoda and Ray blocks, which then became Nano, because I saw those as being able to solve the scaling issue, like to be able to scale to a global level pretty much, while also having the store of value characteristics that I thought were important as well. So that kind of drew me back into it. And then at the same time, or roughly the same time, I started working at the Dutch Central Bank, which is related to crypto, I guess, because it's just also all about money, about monetary policy. How do we want to set up our money system, our financial system, but from a very different angle. And then from there, it kind of just kept developing, where I got more and more active in the Nano community. I started writing articles. I wish I could have done a podcast like you, to be honest. Like, I find it really fun to listen to them and to watch them. But yeah, obviously I was anonymous at the time, which made it a bit harder to do a podcast. But yeah, so I got more and more into actively doing stuff around crypto, which eventually ended up with me starting a crypto business.
So tell us about being on the inside of the enemy, working for the central bank. Is it all like shadowy robes and finding ways to manipulate the fluoride-filled population, or what's going on in there?
Yeah, so we start our days usually sacrificing a few baby goats. No, it's so that's the hard part for me, kind of, right? Because we're always very critical of central banks and central bankers, which I also am, to be fair. And I think there's good reason to be. But yeah, they're all very good people, which sounds super cliche. But I did like a young professional program to start at the central bank, where I did like a few different roles within the central bank, like a few different jobs. And just my colleagues and the people I did that program with, everyone was super nice, very intelligent, and very honestly interested in creating a better financial system. So yeah, I am not the biggest critic of central bankers. I am very critical of central banks, because I think their starting point from which they argue is that deflation is unequivocally bad and inflation is unequivocally necessary, and that centralization is needed because they need to have the power to change the money supply, to censor transactions, all that kind of stuff. I really disagree with. But at the same time, I know the people that are arguing for that side are, by and large, like, obviously not everyone, but everyone that I've met pretty much are just good people. They just have different reasoning than we do. But yeah, they're not as evil as many people think.
Right, so when it comes to the fact that crypto has been created and succeeding now, maybe this is a kind of somewhat a stupid question because everybody already knows this, but how do they rationalize or justify to themselves in that kind of environment the tremendous, overwhelming success of Bitcoin? I think everybody who listens to the show will be familiar, with their friends or family that they've tried to say, look, this is something you should pay attention to, and that people are not interested, or they dismiss it, or they think it's not going to work, or they read a media headline, right? But people who are in a central bank looking at this, if Bitcoin is succeeding and crypto is succeeding despite it seemingly flaunting their main principles that they think are absolutely required, and then this is just an obvious case of reality proving them wrong, how do they justify that?
Yeah, so I think the main justification, the main argument would be that it is succeeding as an investment or as a speculation, they would call it more, not so much as actual money or as something to take into account as like an alternative to money. They see it mostly just as people want to gamble. Crypto gives them a new outlet to gamble. It's a less regulated thing to gamble on. So that would be their defense of it. I have to be honest. There's also a big lack of knowledge. Like for the longest time, my division director, like 2 levels above me, essentially 1 level below the top of the board of directors, she had like an article online on the website of the central bank which talked about Satoshi Nakamoto, the Japanese man, blah, blah, blah. Where I'm like, okay, like if this is the level, or someone else would tell me like, yeah, you know, Dogecoin, the coin being issued like by Elon Musk. I'm like, this is not how it works, guys. That's not what crypto is. Like, it's not actually being issued by Elon Musk. We don't know if Satoshi was a Japanese man, but like it's unlikely in a way. So there's also a big lack of knowledge. But when they like the actual criticism they would have is it isn't money, it isn't a store of value, it's just speculation, gambling, and at its best investment, but just a way to fleece investors pretty much.
And did you get the sense that, I mean, you're saying, okay, they were good people and maybe they had their point of view and maybe also they were a bit misunderstanding of it. Did you feel like that resulted in political pressure, though, to that presumably some of these people who are at the top of the central bank are heavily involved in the government, are advising people, are maybe, you know, tipping the scales one way or another on legislation and things like that? Did you get a sense of any of that going on? And was that, again, just good intentions misdirected, or, you know, how do you explain that or talk about that?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely good intentions misdirected. So the Dutch central bank has 3 main roles. Well, it's a bit more, but like the main roles are supervision of financial institutions. So just like making sure banks don't fail, supervising the directors of banks, that kind of stuff. The second is setting monetary policy together with other EU member banks. And the third is advising the government or advising official bodies on financial policy, economic policy, all that kind of stuff. So the same would hold true for crypto to a lesser or greater extent, because the government also had their own crypto like experts, specialists. But yeah, there was certainly a part of that. I've done that myself. Like I've talked to, like high up, like our minister of economy at the time, for example, economic affairs. I don't know how it translates in English. But yeah, there was definitely advice going on. And I think misguided advice in a way. So in the end, like this is sort of skipping ahead a bit, but in the end, when I was working at the central bank, I was the crypto policy expert or like the crypto lead, depending at which time you asked. So it would be me advising others on what we should do about crypto. But yeah, the Dutch central bank definitely played a big role in that part, like in advising official bodies on what we should do about this whole crypto thing. So yeah.
So you're telling us the Dutch central bank has a huge stack of Nano, right? Which they're going to announce and pump the price.
I can not officially confirm nor deny. No, I would be very surprised.
Okay, well, I guess maybe they didn't want to listen to you, and maybe that's how we ended up where we're at today, right?
I did give like a presentation also within the central bank, because I feel like many people hadn't even tried out crypto like ever. Literally, I think there were maybe 3 people within the entire central bank of 2,000 people who had ever done like a transaction. So I did a presentation to just show everyone sort of like, how does crypto work? How do you set up a wallet? And I sent like all of them some Nano, but then I had them donate it to like a few charities they could pick from. So I don't think many of them held their Nano. But yeah, there were central bankers at one time who had at least some Nano. I think some probably still do, right? Just because I talked about it, I sent them some, but not in their official position as central bankers.
All right, so tell me, where does Mira Hurley come into it? So to give some background to my listeners, you have been fairly influential, not as a huge, you know, not like Michael Saylor level or anything, right? But in the sphere of digital cash crypto, which is a bit of a little smaller world going on within the larger crypto scene. Like anything, people get to know each other, and a lot of the chat goes on Twitter, which is a bit of the sort of neutral battleground in some sense, where there's all the different camps competing. Anyway, you have a fairly popular account there, but for many years, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 years, probably longer, you were posting as Mira Hurley with an AI generated avatar well before that was the cool thing to do. This, I don't know, woman who looks like she's in her, early 30s or something like that. And that kind of stood out because you could basically tell like it was AI generated. Like I for sure knew that you'd used this person does not exist or something like that, right? To create it, but not everybody would have known that. Like people are easily suckered on the internet, and it's funny how much even just having a different photo can also change the way people interact with you, right? So anyway, you had this female persona for a very long time, and then only recently have put your like actual face and details up there with a bit of an explanation of why you did it. So just walk me through starting that and then how it kind of got to where it is today.
Yeah. Okay, so starting it that ties in nicely to the central bank story, just because I started working at the central bank. I also really wanted to discuss crypto. I had a non-anonymous crypto or like Twitter account for a while, also on Reddit. But then once I started working at the central bank, I was like, this is not going to work, because the central bank would not enjoy me talking about crypto on Twitter. Like it could be seen as the central bank view, right? Just like you asked, like, does the central bank hold Nano? Like they wouldn't want that sort of thing going on. And at the same time, people in crypto are very strongly against central banks. So it could sort of only work to my disadvantage if the two got linked. Like the central bank would not like it, crypto people would not like it. I would just be a central bank shill, essentially. So I decided to go with an anonymous account, which was kind of as far removed from myself as was possible. So yeah, a woman, I thought she looked Canadian. It was indeed thispersondoesnotexist.com. I thought she looked Canadian. I threw it into like a Canadian name generator. Got Mira Hurley. I'm like, yep, looks like her. Never expecting it to blow up this big or to like remain an account for so long. I was like, okay, I just want to be able to reply to some stuff, essentially. But then there was never really a good time to switch back because I worked at the central bank for the better part of 4 years, I think like 3.5 years. And during that time, obviously, I had to keep it separate that way. And then I had some bad experiences on that account, which kind of convinced me like maybe anonymous is better than being public. Like there are a lot of advantages to being anonymous, and there are some big disadvantages to being out there with your actual name. So I never saw a really strong reason to become non-anonymous or like myself on Twitter until we started NanoGPT, for which we started a company. And then if you start a company, you're in all the registries with your own name. So it's like kind of become a moot point. Like I can try and hide the fact that Mira is Milan, but then obviously Mira founded NanoGPT, co-founded NanoGPT. And obviously, if you look up NanoGPT in like a big business registry, you'll see Milan de Rede, which is not Mira. So yeah, it became kind of a moot point. So I was like, okay, might as well go all the way, be Milan on Twitter, Milan. I never know how to pronounce my own name in English. And then be able to do fun stuff like this and do Twitter spaces and go to conferences, that kind of stuff. So the benefits started outweighing the disadvantages, all the more so since I couldn't actually be anonymous anymore. So it wasn't really like I didn't have that much of a choice. So I figured I'll just make the best of it and, go all the way, be public.
Now, I was telling you before the show, I was watching some of Joel's interview that he did with you on his channel, and you actually told a story there about that somebody before this had already kind of tracked you down and cracked the mystery and reported you to the central bank. Walk me through that. I thought that was a really good story.
Yeah, so yeah, it's a fun story in hindsight. At the time, it was not so fun, but I posted this big tweet thread, whatever you want to call it. I post way too long tweet threads And this one was about Bitcoin security, or like its long-term security mostly, where I thought it would have issues staying decentralized and therefore secure in the long run. And I laid out my argument essentially. It got quite big, like got tons of views. I don't know exactly how many, but it was like a few 100,000, I think. And yeah, someone or a few someones from the Bitcoin community seemed to strongly dislike that. So they dug deep enough to figure out my real name. I could never figure out like how they found it. I think I registered for some services, like doing essentially a call like this, right? You input your name and your email, whatever. I think maybe on some I used my actual email, so Milan de Rede, blah blah blah, with my screen name being Mira or Senatus, like my Reddit account. So I think that's how the two got linked, by someone like looking into their sort of user data or something. It's the only thing I can think of, to be honest. But anyway, so they figured it out. They contacted the compliance department of the Dutch Central Bank, and they essentially reported me with like a huge list of the tweets that I had done with the timestamps on there of, these are during Dutch working hours, all of these tweets, sort of showing like, get him back to work, get him like off of Twitter, but also sort of reporting the most incendiary posts towards central banks, or like the ones that were most, I don't know, anti-euro, anti-dollar or whatever, and sort of reporting that as being like, look, he's doing this during working hours, he's arguing against central banks, get a grip on this guy or fire him, whatever. So they reported that to the central bank, to the compliance department. So yeah, not so fun times for me. Like not what you want to happen, right? There was good reason I tried to keep the two separate, and this kind of messed that up.
Yeah, but then what happened? What did the bank do?
So the bank, like, to their credit, was super chill about it. They forwarded the email to me so I could see what was being reported, what was being sent. They were like, okay, we don't agree with any of this, or like they didn't agree with someone reporting me for this. They're like, it's your private life. Do whatever you want in your private life, as long as you're not representing this as the views of the Dutch Central Bank. It's totally fine. Do whatever you want. And just be aware that there's someone or someone's gunning for you. So they were super nice about it. They didn't ask me to stop or anything. They were like, yeah, if you want to go public with your own name, just make sure you have like, these are not the views of the Dutch Central Bank. But they were also like, we kind of understand if you don't want to go public at this point. But yeah, just be aware. If we get any more emails, we'll let you know. We're not going to reply to this or like do anything about it in any way. So they were, to their credit, super, super chill about it.
I love, the reason I particularly love this story is that in my imagination, and I don't know whether this is true or not, right? But you have this upset, toxic BTC Twitter maximalist warrior who's like frantically researching up all your threads or whatever, and sends all this into the bank, and then the bank is completely chilled. And I'm like, this guy probably had never met anyone Dutch, because if you know Dutch people, you're like, they are some of the most relaxed, easygoing people in the world. They're not, the American guys, I just imagine it was an American guy, is projecting like, oh, if somebody sent this to the Federal Reserve, they'd be out to get him, and the IRS would be kicking in his door or something like that. But in the Netherlands, it's like, hey man, somebody's out to get you. Just look out for that. But if you want to keep tweeting fuck the central bank during work hours, crack on with that. Like, that's all good. You are upsetting people.
Yeah, it's honestly really funny. Apparently the same happened to Justin Bonds. So someone also, he posted some thread, and someone reported him as well to like the company email address, to like CEO at whatever. But he is the CEO. Like, he's the CEO and founder of the company. So they were reporting him, and he's like, right, like,
it's me,
keep
bro.
going, guys. Like,
oh man, well, it just goes to show, this stuff. We exist in a bit of a weird world, in the crypto world, because in some sense the stakes are pretty high. Like, this is pretty serious stuff, but at the same time, there's a lot of keyboard warriors, and that almost makes it worse, because it's like you're not just worried about serious people being out to get you, but it's hard to sometimes distinguish them from the fog of like, little keyboard warriors and what their capability is as well, And I just on that topic, I mean, you said very briefly there's some sort of pros and cons to being anonymous. I wonder if you have any more reflections on that. Obviously, if you are a bit more off the radar in your specific situation, you could be more frank with your views. Maybe you have to worry less, about physical security or stuff like that. But on the other hand, maybe it's harder to appear on podcasts or to promote a point of view. Do you have any thought? Like, I think this is a fascinating topic because I was in a similar position to you, and this happens a lot in cryptocurrency. There's still to this day many people who post pseudonymously or don't post at all, don't make a big deal out of it. Like, I just posted on Reddit for many years, and then when I started the podcast, I was like, okay, things have got to a point where I feel like the risk has lowered from being a public cryptocurrency advocate in that manner, where I was willing to do it. But before that, I was very wary of it. And honestly, people like Vitalik or Roger Ver, or people who are big crypto figures right from the early days, people I think in retrospect don't really understand just how big of a risk those people were taking, and or their personal circumstances maybe being in a way that everyone else wasn't. So I just wonder if you have any reflections on that.
Yeah, I think the risk is way bigger even for like Vitalik and Roger Ver, right? Because people know they hold quite a lot in like Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, whatever they have. So the wrench attack scenario for them must be very real. I actually happened to meet Vitalik here just under a month ago. He's a super chill guy. I was sort of half expecting him to have like security with him because, everyone knows he's like very rich. And that if you threaten him, then, he probably has quite some crypto in some accessible wallet. So I would be very afraid of that, to be honest, myself. I don't hold that much. So for me, the risk is lesser in that sense. But I think it can be quite dangerous in a way to have all that information out there. In my case, I also talked about this on another podcast, I think, but I got like a death threat, or like multiple actually, where people also had my address and everything in the threat, which was like you said, it's keyboard warriors, but it's still sort of disconcerting to see like, hello, Milan, this is your address and we know where you live. Stop doing this stuff. So I see the arguments for being anonymous very strongly. And I think it should be more normal for people to be anonymous. I try not to care who I'm talking to because I'm like, okay, they could be anonymous. This could be their actual account. It shouldn't matter. It should be just about the arguments, about what they're saying. And I wish we would have more of that. But at the same time, it is also nice to be able to do stuff like this, right? Talk to someone sort of face to face. In this case, not exactly face to face.
It's all right. We'll do it face to face sometime.
Yeah,
we can find a chance.
But it does make it feel more real, right? Because talking to this anonymous, it is easier to be pissed off at people when they're just an anonymous picture or something. Whereas if you're talking to someone, like I meet a lot of crypto people lately, and suddenly they're all super chill and super open to, this is actually a valid criticism and whatever. So I think there's a lot of advantages to being non-anonymous, but I think it should be more normal to be anonymously discussing stuff, just because there is a very valid reason for many people not to want to be out in public with all these arguments with, if you talk about some crypto token, it blows up in price. People know you're like becoming a millionaire, billionaire, whatever. Like that's not a super chill situation, I think, right? Like crypto, it's a very easy way to transfer value, which also makes it a very easy way to steal value in a way. So for me, that would be a reason that if, I ever become super rich, I would actually consider security, which, sounds very weird to say, but I get the arguments for being anonymous. And I wish I could have stayed anonymous in a way and done all this. But sometimes you have to make choices, which, also your podcast, right? Like it would be less interesting if we couldn't see your face and didn't know the person.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, I have to do it I felt like for the credibility, when I started it, I was sort of like, I was a very, very popular poster on Reddit in the block size wars and all that. And actually, one of my listeners sent me an archive. A lot of the posts have been sort of deleted and got censored and stuff like that. But somebody had like some Reddit archive that they dug up from somewhere. We're going to do an episode of the show about it sometime, where we can maybe like next year when it's like 10 years or something, and we can do like a time capsule and look at, I made some predictions and different things, how I was explaining Bitcoin back then versus how I'd explain it now. I think it would be really fun, right? But I was, very, very, like, hard to know, right? But without being, Andreas Antonopoulos, who at the time was huge, I'm sure I would have been one of the most popular posters. And I definitely was like, okay, let me not just be putting a photo of myself anywhere or like talking about this too much or anything like. But then when I started the podcast, I was like, nah, things have evened out a little bit, and it's just not going to be as relatable. It's just not going to be as credible. And so that's kind of a risk, we're taking here, right?
And do you think it was a good choice? Like, are you happy with the choice in hindsight?
Yeah, I am. Although I am a bit wary, like you said, that sort of my incentives are a bit at odds. Where the bigger the show gets, obviously that's better for the show and better for me in some respects. And that's the mission. That's all what we're trying to do. But at the same time, the risk increases proportionally. But it's sort of true of any public figure, I feel, in a certain sense, right? It just doesn't matter. Like, even if you're a movie star or I don't know, whatever you're known for, even if you're just a big business guy or anything, the more your reputation is, the more you're physically at risk from people trying to kidnap you or screw around with you in various ways. Anyway, so I sort of feel like there's got to be systems to handle this kind of stuff. You just don't find out about them as much until you're in that position,
Yeah, no, I think so too. I think just crypto maybe has a higher proportion of crazies than like the general population does, I think. But yeah, you're right. That's like it's an issue for more people in more situations. So yeah, it shouldn't be a reason not to do it.
And what did you find with the change from, putting your real name and stuff on it? Have you noticed a change in the way that people react to your account? I mean, I actually kind of like Mira. I feel like maybe once a week, April Fool's Day or something, just go back to Mira for a day or something. I don't know.
Yeah, you're not the only one. Some people were very disappointed. I got some replies like, "Oh man, I was really hoping to date Mira at one point. Like, she seemed like wife material." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, man. Like, it's not gonna happen." But I would say most reactions have actually been super positive, which was nice. Like when I posted it, a lot of people were like, "Ah, it's because, like you said, right? It was an AI generated picture." Which at the time, this was actually a pretty advanced sort of AI picture on thispersondoesnotexist.com. It was like pretty good for its time, but you could tell, like you could very clearly tell it was AI generated if you spend like, I don't know, a few minutes looking at it. Nowadays, I think you could actually make a picture that's just indistinguishable from reality. But so many people did sort of know or strongly suspect. So for them, it was nice to be able to be like, I knew it, and now I finally am talking to the real person, and maybe this is all AI generated, who knows? But no, so most reactions were super cool. And I got invites to some podcasts and, some conference stuff, and was finally able to talk to some people with video, with voice, meet some people in real life soon, that kind of stuff. So yeah, most reactions have been super positive. I would say like literally 99% positive. Then a few joking reactions where people were just disappointed of this, this one girl in crypto. Finally, we have some girls in crypto. Turns out they're not a girl. So those were very disappointed. But yeah, in general, it's been really good, I think. Even better, to be honest, than I had expected.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, that's very cool. That's very cool. So then, as a result of all this, you're working at the central bank, and then you decide, okay, we got to make NanoGPT, right? So hit me with that part of the story.
Yeah, so it wasn't as one-to-one as that pretty much because I in the end I was working at the central bank as a crypto policy advisor or crypto policy expert, whatever, because I genuinely thought I could like make a change from the inside or have some positive effect at least, which after a few months there I realized was not going to be the case just because they were very stuck in their ways. So whatever I would do, they would sort of take the arguments against crypto and be able to use them. Whereas if I argued in favor of crypto, it would just be ignored essentially. So it felt like I wasn't actually doing that much good within the central bank. So I decided to leave. I didn't have anything lined up. I was just like, okay, I'll live off of my savings and figure out what I want to do. I did some traveling. I did some consulting for like crypto stuff. At the time, like quite some companies were interested in what do we need to do with this whole crypto stuff, what can we do as a company. And obviously I had quite some experience also within the central bank, so they would ask me as a consultant. So that was quite fun but not really my thing. And then I started learning how to program with the help of ChatGPT because it had come out and like was fantastic to use. So I just started using it a little bit, and then I realized, sort of many people could not afford the subscription. Like it was super helpful and useful to me to be able to access like the best models, but I knew not everyone could. And then I was like, okay, if I'm learning to program anyway, I might as well see if I can make this more accessible to more people. So I started this Telegram chatbot where essentially people would put in some Nano, like send it into a wallet on that chatbot, and then they could access ChatGPT paper prompt. I'm not sure. I think I started with just ChatGPT, not even images. Then I added like DALL-E image generations to that chatbot, and it kind of got a bit more popular. Not super popular, but like had quite some people using it. And then Huggy, who is now my co-founder, reached out to me on Twitter, and told me like, okay, this is a really cool thing you're setting up. I think it would be even better if we can turn it into a website because many people don't have access to Telegram, don't even know what it is. If we want to make this really big, the way to go is a website, which was a fair point. So we expanded it. So now NanoGPT, for those that don't know, is this website where you can access all of the top AI models. So that's ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok, the Llama models, like anything you can think of in terms of text models we have. We also have most of the big image models like Flux, DALL-E, Playground, Recraft is the newest big one. We have all of those, and you don't need any subscription to use them. You can just pay per use or pay per prompt using at the start only Nano. Then obviously we added Bitcoin Cash. Now we have a few other currencies there as well, and even credit cards. But it's essentially a way that people can access all of these models without needing to commit to a subscription, which can be quite expensive for many people, and in a way where they can have a bit more privacy, because I obviously appreciate privacy given my history. So I want people to be able to have at least some measure of privacy rather than giving up all of their data to these big tech companies where it's like OpenAI, you have an account which you pay with credit cards, so they have your name, your credit card details, your address, your email. Then you do prompts where you ask about like very personal stuff or medical stuff. All of that can be linked together, which I feel is, I feel like people don't appreciate sufficiently how much data is being gathered there in one place, and how sort of tempting it will be to sell that data or start using it. So we try to give people a bit more privacy, and not need a subscription to use these models. And yeah, it kind of took off a fair bit, which is really cool to see. We have a lot of users from like poor countries, in many ways. So like Nigeria, Indonesia, Kenya, a lot of countries in Africa, I guess, where a subscription is super expensive to them because $20 a month is like very expensive if you don't make that much. But they can use our service and spend like $1 a month to ask the most pressing questions they have, and get medical advice in some cases, get like help with homework or learning something. So yeah, it's been super cool. It feels like we're actually helping people. We get a lot of very positive feedback, which is super nice. Just people reaching out and being like, hey, I used it for this, because obviously we cannot see what people do. It's all completely private. So the only thing we see is when people reach out and show us like, hey, I wrote my thesis with the help of your NanoGPT, or I got medical advice from NanoGPT, which I've said this on other podcasts. I'm not sure if I would recommend that, but for context, this guy lived in a small village and his medical advice would have been a shaman. So he was like, okay, anything is better than going to the shaman, which I think is fair. But yeah, so yeah, built NanoGPT, which keeps growing quite quickly. It's a lot of fun. It feels very rewarding to do. And yeah, it's becoming more and more successful, which, yeah, it's just really fun to build.
Well, I mean, it's a very interesting story, right? Because we live in this age where I feel like maybe bootstrapped kind of home businesses are making a bit of a comeback, right? They were in the past maybe, you know, more viable, and then through, you know, perhaps the 2000s and the 2010s, VC capital was so organized and people started up all these companies, you know, like the social network, like Facebook, that's just an Uber and whatever, that are like burning money like nobody's business. And that same bubble has now come along to AI. But at the same time, those tools have made it so that individual founders and co-founders or small teams like you're talking about, especially now that it can help you out with a lot of the programming and so forth, that before would have been a hugely expensive or time-consuming barrier to entry, means you can just spin up something like this. Like, if you're already, I don't know if you're already profitable or not, or what your sort of economic, you know, is looking like on that front, but it just feels like we're in a world now where there's so much access to both information, commerce, with crypto specifically in many parts of the world that wouldn't have had. I mean, even for me, like, I have plenty of access to banking and so forth and so forth, but still setting up Stripe is a fucking pain in the ass, man. Let me tell you, like, it's such a big pain in the ass, and registering a bank account and doing all this stuff versus just, here's a crypto address. Like, that's what I did when I did the first episode of the podcast, put a donation address and bam, somebody sent me $5 and that was it. You're monetized like straight away, right? So
Yeah.
tell me about that part of the business. Have you started any businesses before or not?
I did when I was younger, but it was very different from this, to be honest. And back then, crypto, let me think, this is like 13 years ago now. By then, I didn't know that much about crypto yet, so it wasn't built on crypto in any way. But yeah, nowadays, the Stripe part, by the way, I can only agree. It's such a pain. It was such a pain to set up. It's so expensive as well for us to accept payments via Stripe. We actually explicitly offer a discount if people don't use Stripe, just because, you know, for many people, credit card just makes sense, as in it's what they're used to, it's what they want to use. So we kind of had to add it. But we would prefer people don't use credit cards, just because the fees are like 10% or something. It's insane. So yeah, that part. So that's the reason we started with crypto, is because our entire goal is to give people access to these AI tools without spending a lot of money. And then if your monthly income is low, you don't want to like deposit a minimum of $10 or like even $1, sometimes maybe too much. So we started with like a minimum deposit of 1 cent, and we had people who literally deposited 1 cent and then did a prompt and were like, nice, I got my answer, that's it. Which I like I'm totally fine with. And also for Bitcoin Cash, right? Our minimum is 10 cents deposit. You're not able to do that with Stripe or with any traditional payment processing. Like, the fees will always be higher than 10 cents. So in that sense, crypto really helps. Like, it's a way to actually get small payments in, to actually allow people to only spend a few cents, because some services might only be worth a few cents. They're very, very valuable to people, but yeah, it still might not be worth it to do the Stripe payment. So I think crypto has been fantastic there. At least like low fee chains, obviously, right? Like Ethereum and Bitcoin, this is not going to work because we would pay more in fees than, you know, we would get for the small transactions. But yeah, Bitcoin Cash, Nano, we have a few others. It's just perfect to use in this way. It's super quick. It's super low fees. So yeah, perfect for these use cases, I think.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed. I haven't used it a ton. I personally I don't even use AI very much.
Wow,
I'm
that's
increasingly like, what am I just out of the loop on this, or my mind just doesn't click with it. So I've used it a bit, but I don't know. I clearly need to sit down with somebody who knows a lot more and be like, oh, this is what you can do with it, or just spend some time playing around with it. I don't know. But anyway, I definitely have used it, and I tried it when I first sent in some money. The only thing that annoyed me was that you added BCH, so I was like, I'll try this, and it all worked great, but then I couldn't withdraw my BCH. I was like,
yeah.
God damn it. So are you considering to, I mean, even if you use Nano internally or whatever, I couldn't care less, but it would be pretty cool if you added the ability that you could then withdraw in any crypto. And to be honest, if you could withdraw in any crypto, then you almost would have a side shift exchange going at the same time as AI models, people depositing in one and withdrawing in another.
Yeah, and that is kind of the reason that it's hard for us to add this, because we would kind of become an exchange if we added the ability to just convert back to whatever people wanted. So like, not official advice, but you can withdraw Nano and convert it to anything else after you've withdrawn it. If that's what people want to do, that's totally fine. But if we start adding that into our service ourselves, then I think the argument of you are being an exchange or swap provider is a very fair argument, to be honest. So that's kind of why we have to stay away from that to an extent. I don't know if there could be an exception where if people deposit Bitcoin Cash, they can only swap back to Bitcoin Cash or something. It's just as annoying as this is, like, there's the crypto world, right, where all of this moving across chains and whatever, it's super easy, it's super fast. But there's also the real world where we don't want to be sued and we don't want to be seen as an exchange. We don't want to get into any legal trouble. And sort of even the risk of it is pretty big for it feels like small amount of people that would be interested in it. Like, surprisingly few people even withdraw in the first place, which I don't know, maybe that makes sense. Maybe people just deposit small amounts and then they don't need to withdraw. But it feels like we would be adding something that's risky for us in a way, for like a very, very small group of people that's interested in it. Many don't even realize they can withdraw, turns out. Like, I've had to tell people, like, you have some Nano in there, you can just hit withdraw. So I don't know. I think honestly, at the start, I was thinking like, yes, this would be very cool to add the withdrawals for Bitcoin Cash. But over time, I've actually gotten less fond of it rather than more fond. So I would say for Bitcoin Cash users, or for any users in general, just deposit small amounts. Like, we don't do any fixed fee on it. We don't go like, oh, you deposit 10 cents, we're going to keep 5 cents. No, it's just 10 cents is 10 cents. So I would recommend just do small amounts every single time. If you run out, add another 10 cents or $1. That might be more practical. But like, just don't put in too much is, I think, what I would recommend instead.
Yeah, and so you said, like, it seems to have been very well received. Have you noticed any difference in the different communities? Like, what's your spread or your breakdown? I think you even said on a blog post that you're going to publish like some BitPay style stats of who's actually using it and what the volume is between communities. That would be a very, very interesting insight to have, really. I'm hoping you do something like that.
Yeah, that's definitely the plan. So we added a few more payment methods in October. So starting from this month, so like at the end of November, we can post an overview sort of how many transactions were done in the different chains, like a distribution of how much volume in the different chains, that kind of stuff. I think that would be super interesting to see, because we all know BitPay does the same sort of thing, but BitPay also doesn't support some of the crypto that we have. Does BitPay support Bitcoin Cash actually, or?
It does. It does. We're
Okay.
like currently the number third or fourth biggest coin, and I like to keep an eye on it because the Litecoin community, that's their favorite thing in the world, basically,
Yes.
because it's the one stat they're winning on. So they always are like,
Yeah.
wow, Litecoin is number one, and that's largely because a lot of the BTC guys are like hate BCH, but they're like, oh, we'll tolerate Litecoin because our own chain is broken, and then
Yeah.
that's boosted them up, and then there's BTC, which is slowly like declining over time as people find better options eventually, and then there's ETH, and then like BCH is kind of in there. But if BCH starts rising on BitPay, it is game over for BTC. Let me tell you that.
Yeah, so this is kind of what I want to see as well. So I'm wondering, first of all, just what the pure distribution is. I think that would be fun to see. But I also want to see what the average size is between the different chains, because my sort of assumption beforehand is the smallest deposits are going to be Nano, like on average, just because like completely zero fee means we have people who literally deposit 1 cent or 2 cents, or like under 10 cents. So I feel like the smallest average is going to be Nano. And then I just like, it's going to be interesting to see what chain does most transactions, but also which chain does like big transactions on average or smaller. Like we have plans to add more coins to the list that we accept. ETH probably also. So I'm expecting to see ETH might be quite a few transactions, but they're going to be bigger on average just because people pay a big fee for them. So that's my theory, but like we'll see what happens during the month. We'll see what the distribution is like. It's going to be interesting data for people anyway, I think. And also it might inform others, right, on okay, what should we prioritize in terms of adding? Because actually that might be interesting to talk about. Like the reason we added Bitcoin Cash, it's not because of some BitPay statistics or whatever, because there just aren't that many actual reliable statistics. Like, yeah, there's BitPay, but it's like this one provider. And as you say, there's some bias, I think, in BitPay. So then what do you go off? So for us, it was just like, I talked to quite a lot of Bitcoin Cash people on Twitter. They seem like nice people always. And most of them are actually interested in using crypto as money, like in spending their Bitcoin Cash and using it. So it's this sort of subjective thing where you're like, okay, what are we adding next? And then, Bitcoin Cash just seemed to make sense because of the community, essentially. But that's such a vague thing to go off. So I'm hoping we can publish these statistics and show people like, you might want to implement these chains because there's a lot of payments. You might want to prioritize this over the other chains. Maybe we can help a bit. And then people can also, just to be clear, reach out to us. We will gladly help you with any information we have on how do you set this up, what are the easiest ways to get started, because we want to build a circular ecosystem. The more people that accept crypto, the better. The more people that pay out in crypto, the better. So yeah, we want to be as helpful as we can. We think publishing these statistics is one part of that, and like people reaching out to us is another part of that, so we can help. But yeah, end of this month we'll do the first release.
Damn, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Going to be really interesting. Why do you have a 10-cent BCH minimum? Why not 1 cent?
So mostly because we also still pay transaction fees when we use it, which is like 1 cent, right? Like it's super cheap. But like having a bunch of 1 cent transactions spammed at us would cost us sort of more effort than it's worth. Also, I'll be honest, we do a 10-cent minimum. In practice, almost no one uses the 10-cent minimum for most of the other chains that we have.
Yeah.
So it kind of feels like it's not really worth the effort of making it 1 cent. Like people don't seem to mind trying with 10 cents, like if you make that the first deposit. But we have a surprising amount of people who, even as their first deposit, do more than 10 cents. I would be like, I always start with like the smallest possible amount, right, to test it out.
Min-maxer.
What? Sorry?
Yeah, you're min-maxing, you're just
Yeah,
like
yeah, exactly.
the most efficient one.
Yeah, but like there hasn't, to be honest, been really any demand to lower the minimum. So yeah, haven't really considered it too much, just because at one point it just gets like too much effort for the small amount that it is, I guess.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Okay, we've got in the chat, we've got the Caspers83 saying NanoGPT is great, and Bitcoin Out Loud says, I'm enjoying NanoGPT, love that new models are being added. So you've got certainly quite a few fans there. Have you noticed any distinction, like you were talking about, in the different communities that you've been interacting with? Obviously, also you're a big crypto Twitter regular, so I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of how it goes there.
Yeah, first of all, thank you guys. That's really nice to hear. Like, it's honestly super fun to build something and then people actually enjoy using it. So yeah, thank you a lot. But what have we seen? So the Bitcoin Cash community picked up on NanoGPT quite quickly and quite big in many ways. I'm kind of expecting our volume for like the first month that we're showing after Nano Bitcoin Cash to be the biggest, which kind of also makes sense because it's what we've had for longest. So I feel like there are many people in the Bitcoin Cash community that know about NanoGPT. Um, I think the biggest part of Bitcoin Cash for me or the community was they're super helpful with feedback. So I don't know if I also reached out to you before we added it, but we got like a ton of feedback on, okay, this is the best way to add it because we weren't sure like what do we use? Do we use prompt.cash? There were a few options, I think. We ended up settling on prompt cash. For anyone else looking into accepting Bitcoin Cash payments, I would recommend prompt cash. It's great, works really well. But so we got a lot of help there. Then when we ran into an issue at one point with prompt cash implementing it, tons of people were like, "Oh, I can help. I can reach out to them. This is their Telegram. This is whatever." So people were very helpful. We had a lot of people beta. I don't know how you pronounce it. Beta testing our Bitcoin Cash implementation to be like, okay, this is how we can improve it, because we kind of want it to be an implementation that people within Bitcoin Cash can also be sort of proud of. We don't want to be like, oh, this service added Bitcoin Cash, but it's like kind of shitty. Like, now payments and BitPay, the transactions take like quite a while if you do Bitcoin Cash and they add like all these fees on top. We wanted this to be an implementation where, we know we're not natively Bitcoin Cash, but we want people to really like the way we've implemented it. So we thought that feedback was important. It's also nice to see we've had a few people who I know used NanoGPT to demonstrate how well Bitcoin Cash works. So that was super cool to see. In terms of how Bitcoin Cash people use it, I think honestly it's similar to how people from other communities use it. We just have people reaching out to say like a bunch of different stuff they use it for. I don't think Bitcoin Cash people use it in any sort of very different way than other communities, but they're quite vocal, but like in a good way. They give good feedback.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. So let me push you a little bit here on the Nano stuff. So you started with obviously Nano, and that was your big thing is Mira Hurley. You were, probably I'd say by far the biggest known advocate, certainly that I'm aware of. I only really know like there's you, and then there was Colin LeMahieu, who's the guy who founded it or whatever, and he blocked me on Twitter ages ago, even though I'd never even interacted with him. So I don't know, he's a bit salty about something. No doubt my arguments were so strong that he, I showed up in his For You tab and that was it. It was already pissing him off. So I actually had a good laugh about that. But I had a theory that Mira was actually his alt account that he was using to try and build hype, because it would make sense as being kind of obsessively interested in Nano, knew a lot about it, and it had all the time to do it, and also then with himself could be creating like there's more of a community going on. So tell me about Nano. Why did you get so much excited about Nano? And obviously we've debated the merits and pros and cons of Nano a little bit, so I think it's interesting we can get into a little bit of that for the listeners to hear.
Yeah. So the reason that I'm excited about Nano is, well, I think there's two parts to being good money, and I think people in Bitcoin Cash would mostly agree. Like, you need to be a good medium of exchange, but you also need to be a store of value, because if you're only a medium of exchange and no one holds it, then your medium of exchange is not going to have any value. So like, what value are you transferring? So as a medium of exchange, I think it's really hard to beat Nano in many ways, because transactions are zero fees. like the concept of fees does not exist within Nano, which makes it really easy to work with. Also, as a developer, it's just very clean in many ways to have zero fees. And it just makes it great. Like my grandma can understand how to use Nano. There's not even a fee field that you have to deal with. So I think that's very nice. And transactions are instantly settled. Not like zero conf. I guess that's a different sort of way of doing it. But like Nano, it actually takes 400 to 500 milliseconds to have full settlement. Like deterministic settlement cannot be rolled back. So in terms of using it as money, I think it's hard to beat instant transactions at zero fees. And then it's also very scalable. So Nano can theoretically at least do like hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of transactions per second. There are no inbuilt limitations. So in that way, it can actually scale to being global money. So I think those are the important parts for a medium of exchange. I think one criticism that many people had of Nano, which to be honest was quite fair, was that if you have zero fees, how are you going to deal with spam, right? I'm going to guess spam also happened to Bitcoin Cash, or people tried to, but it's harder when you have fees because then it costs people a lot to spam the chain. Nano doesn't have fees. So how do you prioritize, right? So it used to be the case that transactions were prioritized by the proof of work done for a transaction. So you would do like a tiny hashing function, which honestly calling it proof of work is kind of a misnomer because it's so small. But there was a tiny proof of work, and the more proof of work you did for a specific transaction, the higher your priority. That was the old spam, or like that was the old spam resistance, the transaction prioritization, and it just didn't work, to be honest. So a lot of people had criticism of Nano that it could be very easily spammed. Nano enthusiasts would go like, it cannot because we have dynamic proof of work, it was called. It didn't really work that well. So a few years ago, 2021, Nano got spammed very heavily. Exchanges were impacted, people were impacted, and a lot of sort of anti-Nano people could be like, see, I knew no fees didn't work. Nowadays, Nano has a different way of transaction prioritization, which is every time someone does a transaction, it is put into a bucket, essentially, depending on what your balance is. So if I have 1 Nano, I get put into bucket 1. If I have 10 Nano, I go into, say, bucket 3. If I have 100 Nano, it's bucket 5, whatever. And within those buckets, whichever account has not transacted the longest goes first. So it's essentially trying to make sure that spammers who do a lot of transactions in a rapid succession, usually with small amounts, would all fall into the smallest bucket, and then even within that bucket be like the least prioritized transaction. I can go deeper into it if you want, but like the short version of it is this was implemented to solve the spam issue. Nano has been spammed since, and I think the most recent ones, people literally didn't even notice it was being spammed. We noticed because we run a service on Nano, so we watch the network like hawks. But so even in that worst case scenario, transactions were now taking like 3 seconds despite like being under spam. So I feel like that was always the biggest counter argument to Nano, the spammability, and I think that's actually mostly been solved. But yeah, so medium of exchange, it's instant, it's zero fees, it's scalable, and it is spam resistant nowadays. I think for many people what also matters is that it's energy efficient, but I don't think that's actually inherent to being a good medium of exchange. I think in Nano's case, it works. Like it is energy efficient, which is great, but I think that's more of a nice to have because frankly, many people wouldn't care. They just want their transaction to be as quick as possible. But one of the reasons that Nano is so quick and so efficient is because it just optimizes everything for speed, for security, for confirming as quickly as possible, as many as possible. And because of that, it doesn't waste energy because all of the energy goes into confirming transactions. So that's the medium of exchange side. It's just, I think, to be honest, the best medium of exchange I've ever used. And I think it's kind of hard to beat like half a second confirmation with zero fees. But then there's also the store of value side to things, which, as a Bitcoin Cash person, you're probably well aware of the sort of store of value versus medium of exchange discussions. In Nano, I think it's fundamentally a really good store of value because it has a completely fixed supply. So there's no inflation whatsoever. There's also no fees. So the miners, or in Nano's case, the validators, are not actually being paid anything because there is nothing to pay from. But so it's a completely fixed supply. And because there isn't anything to pay to validators, there's no sort of incentive for the big validators to get bigger. There's no centralization of consensus power, voting power, whatever you want to call it. There's no centralization over time. So I think as a store of value, Nano has fixed supply, and it keeps becoming more and more decentralized because sort of the incentive for everyone in Nano is to decentralize it further. Every one Nano that you have is one vote. You can vote for any node. You can change it at any time. And given that you can change it at any time, you will always want to vote for the smallest nodes, or like smaller nodes at least, because that helps decentralize the network further. It makes your Nano more valuable. So yeah, I think medium of exchange, it's quite perfect. I think store of value, it's kind of hard to beat fixed supply and becoming more and more decentralized. So yeah, that's kind of why I realize I go on way too long whenever someone asks me about Nano.
Oh, this is
That's
good.
kind
That's
of
good.
it's why I'm very excited about Nano. It's why we started using Nano. It's also, we store our profits in Nano because we think fundamentally it's the best store of value that we can find. So yeah, that is my reasoning for it.
So where's the catch? Before I put in my perspective, I'm sure my listeners are going to be thinking, okay, this all sounds really great, like zero fees in an ideal world is perfect, instant confirmations, okay, perfectly somehow decentralized sort of nodes, no centralizing miners. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Where's the catch in all this?
Tannenstafel, the beautiful. The catch, honestly, I think many people had the catch as being the spam resistance, which I think was very fair in hindsight and was very much underappreciated by the Nano community. So I know developers were already working on it at the time, but like they couldn't get it essentially improved before an actual spam attack happened. And I think that really hurt people's opinion about Nano. There's also been an exit scam from an exchange earlier on, like Nano's own empty GOX, which I think also really hurt it. In terms of where is the catch, the biggest downsides to Nano that I see are there is no strong privacy, like in Monero, for example. So some people dislike that part. Monero enthusiasts specifically dislike that part. Also, it doesn't do any sort of programmability. It's just pure, simple value transfer. That's it. So like cash tokens are not possible on Nano because it doesn't do smart contracts of any kind. It's just completely pure value transfer. I would say those are the biggest sort of counter arguments people have. Another is that if there is no inflation and no fees, why would people run nodes? That is also one that's quite often mentioned. I can go into that one if you prefer, just because I kind of have some.
That's what we're here for. Yeah. This is. Well, you're already getting to my points, so yeah, hit me with it.
Cool. I'll try and stop taking arguments out of your mouth after this. But
no, this is brilliant. I love it. If I don't have to say anything, that's even better.
I can debate myself.
That's the idea.
Yeah. No, so essentially the argument there is no incentive to run a node because you're not being paid to run a node, and there are costs associated with running a node. So why would anyone want to run a node? First of all, I would say the same argument can be used in Bitcoin and probably also Bitcoin Cash. I think there are probably a fair few people even in Bitcoin Cash who run a node without being a miner. I'm not sure. Like I know in Bitcoin many people do. In Bitcoin Cash,
Yeah, no, there is. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So the argument in Nano is kind of the same. Like you run a node not to make money, but just because you want to have direct access to the network, for example. You're supportive of the network. That can be one, but that's quite altruistic. I think the better one is just, if you run any sort of serious service, you don't want to be dependent on others for your on-chain information. Like if you're Binance and Kraken and Coinbase, you're not gonna see a 10 million deposit come in and be like, oh, I'll just query this like public node and ask it like, is this true? You want to be able to do it yourself because it's more reliable, it's quicker in most cases, and also most of those public nodes have limits at one point, right, of how many requests you can do. I kind of know this firsthand by now because we started running our own node for Nano because of these exact issues. Like, we want to have direct access to the network, and public nodes just don't, like, they're great. There's a lot of public nodes and we're super grateful because it allowed us to get started without any actual investment pretty much. But nowadays we run our own node, which is also super cheap, just to be clear. Like, it costs us 14 euros per month to run this node, and it can do like, I don't know, 50 transactions per second or something. But so the incentives are not directly monetary. The incentives are either because you want to decentralize the network, right? If you have a lot of Nano, you might want to run your own node just to protect the value of your investment. Or if you're a business, it's just the best way to access the network, to have direct access, not rely on anyone else, and have the sort of ultimate security. I guess what crypto was built for originally, right? To not have to trust anyone, but to be able to verify everything yourself. So yeah, I think that's actually not a sort of very strong counter argument, but many people think that there is no incentive to run a Nano node. So yeah, we should do a better job at communicating, I guess, like that there are incentives.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting. And I think the Nano community is in an interesting place to me because they have a lot, like all these points make a lot of sense, and a lot of the community is quite aware of that. Like, I think you say, okay, so the benefits are there, zero fees, energy efficient, not really too worried about having to sustain mining or anything like that. Okay, you've traded off no DeFi, maybe not the world's best privacy, but at the end of the day, if we're trying to be money, we're trying to be money. Do you have any thoughts on why the market doesn't seem to agree? Like we said at the start of the show, Nano is number 360 something. Obviously it fluctuates, but it's certainly not like rocketing up the coin market cap or breaking through in a major way, which of course the BCH community is well aware is a very tough grind. So it's not like that's an easy thing to do. But any thoughts on why, if Nano is so good, it hasn't made more of an impact?
Yeah, it's always a sort of confusing thing. I feel this is why I try not to focus too much on market cap, because then I get annoyed that like Shiba Inu is high up there, or like, I don't know, Ripple, all this kind of stuff where I'm like, this does not make sense. There are so many coins high in the market cap rating where I'm like, this literally makes no sense. But yeah, so why Nano is so low? The main reasons I can think of is, first of all, a lot of people were very excited about Nano and Ray blocks in 2018-ish. And then BitGrill was the main exchange that it was traded on, and the owner exit scammed. But like at the time, it was not clear whether he exit scammed or whether the Nano team, like the Nano Foundation essentially, was in on it. So a lot of people got very pissed at the team behind Nano, also because the exchange owner was saying like it was a flaw in Nano's node software, in the code. It wasn't his fault, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of people got burned on Nano. Just to be clear, like there have been lawsuits and cases about this. He literally just exit scammed. Like he just took the money and ran, essentially. Nano team had nothing to do with it. They literally funded like a legal fund or something to help the victims. But yeah, that kind of burned a lot of people on Nano because that was like its big price rise, and then it just collapsed pretty much. So that didn't help. Then there was the spam attack in 2021, I think it was, which was when Nano was actually growing again. There was the spam attack, and all of this criticism that people had for years, which was no fees, so it can be spammed, was kind of proven true. And now I think, to be honest, I think most people just don't even know yet that sort of spam is a solved problem. Like it's always risky to say solved, right? Because spam resistance is kind of a continuum. But for all intents and purposes, what we can see is like very spam resistant. I think that's not really appreciated enough yet by the market, I think. Aside from that, honestly, it's just an attention game, right? It's attention and network effect. Like Bitcoin Cash has more of a network effect than Nano does, like no two ways about it. So you can have the perfect tech, but no network effect, you're not going to get anywhere. I think it's improving for Nano. I think NanoGPT kind of helps with this. And, we also have some earn options on our website because we want people to be able to earn crypto and then be able to spend it again without having to go through an exchange. So we're trying to build that sort of circular network, not just for Nano, obviously, for every crypto. And yeah, I think it's just very, very underappreciated still. Like every metric I look at, I'm like, okay, this just doesn't make sense in terms of how much it's used, in terms of social engagement on every platform, in terms of active community. Like Nano does well in every single aspect everywhere except for the price. So yeah, I just don't know. My long-term expectation, which is also like we wouldn't hold Nano as a company if we thought it was going to decline in value, obviously. We think in the long term, people will start recognizing the value behind it, and then it will increase in price. I just think it's very underappreciated, but it's all very speculative, so who knows?
Yeah. No, it's super interesting. Like, I think to me, my view of, Nano is, certainly there was a big problem with the marketing or the community relations, in the sense of, like you said, a lot of its community seems very shill heavy. I don't know whether it is actually shills or not shills, but I always thought it funny that Joel always described it as, okay, you don't have proof of work, but instead you have proof of shill. Like if there's no incentives being paid out to the community naturally through the proof of work or through the proof of stake or some other way, well, the community has to earn that money somehow. So instead they go out and shill it. And that's a bad combo, especially when, just like every crypto community, they have at least a bit of bias and a couple of things they're not seeing clearly, like this spam issue. And then even if that's been resolved, which I hadn't followed super closely, then it's going to be tough to like rewrite. Like God knows, it took us literally nearly 7 years now, and still occasionally we get the odd person who's like, Craig, right, BSV, blah blah blah, and you're like, they've split off the network over 6 years ago, which in crypto is a fucking eternity. And people are still just like, that's still their mental model of what BCH is. So it takes a long time to get out of that kind of hole. And like you said, with a small network effect and a small like brand as well, it's just very, very difficult. So Nano certainly, I think, needs some help on the marketing front, which it seems like you're doing a great job of and always have been, but it's a bit you against the world in that sense. I don't know that you're getting a lot of help there, and so obviously now as well you can be even more vocal, so I think that might help. I mean, aside from the fact that I feel like there's no such thing as a free lunch and you don't get something from nothing, this isn't an exact criticism in the sense that I can explain exactly how it works, but to me the difference between a 0 cent fee and a 0.00001 cent fee is enormous, because in aggregate it makes sense that once you have a ton of value flowing through the system, as an end user you never even notice. I never even noticed. So to me, being really excited about having a 0 cent fee, it doesn't move the needle, and I think for a lot of people it doesn't move the needle, and I think that's a big part of the Nano community's problem, is not understanding that for most people it doesn't move the needle. So if you're shilling that as like that's your big headline act, and then everyone's like, yeah, but I already use BCH LTC. Hell, a lot of people use BTC and are like, well, whatever, it costs a couple bucks, but I only use it occasionally to make a spam JPEG. Like, what do I care? It's hard.
I think that's fair. Like, I think the 0 fee instant transfer is like a nice party trick. It's how people want to show off Nano, because it's like, look, I hit confirm and there it is, and like 0 fees paid. And it is super cool to demonstrate. And like I make fun of these people. I do it myself as well. So I totally get it. But I think what people don't appreciate is the 0 fee aspect and the 0 inflation are more important for the store of value side to me than for the transaction side. Because as you say, 0 fee or 0.00001 is not going to make a difference in terms of a single transaction. People barely notice. It is like, it feels cleaner not to have any fee at all, just because you don't have to think about it. But in practice, you can abstract it away in wallets, right? And it's a very small difference. I haven't heard anyone complain about having to pay a fee to pay us at NanoGPT with Bitcoin Cash. To me, it's more like, if you have fees, if you have inflation, those are getting distributed to someone. Like, they're going somewhere. And that distribution to a small group, essentially, because I'm going to guess you also don't mind. I also don't mind. It's like,
but I'm happy to. I'm happy to pay that fee. I'm happy that somebody is getting paid, because it provides a bedrock to the economy. You know, a circular economy has to start somewhere, and that was the initial use case, you know?
Yeah. In a way, I agree, but I also think that for miners, it's not so much a circular economy. It's like they're getting the fees and inflation, and they sell it for dollars because they need to pay for their electricity and their, I don't know, the ASICs that they run, that kind of stuff. So yeah, someone is getting paid, which is very different from in Nano, right? Because the nodes don't get paid at all. But I feel like, I don't know if it's any different for Bitcoin Cash. I would guess not, because it's the same mining algorithm as Bitcoin. But I feel, at least as far as I know, like, correct me if I'm wrong on anything.
No,
here. But I feel like it is kind of a risk that the big miners get paid mining rewards and fees, and they get bigger because of it, because, you know, the bigger you are as a miner, the more economies of scale you have. To me, that is a risk. And then you can say it's good that someone's getting paid to guarantee security, which it is. Like, if Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin stopped paying block rewards and fees, it would be insecure, obviously. So in that sense, it is very good. But I feel like it's not the right long-term solution, because the incentives just are not aligned between people who hold the coin and those who mine the coin. And yeah, like, I'll stop shilling Nano, but that's kind of what I like about Nano. Like, everyone has the same incentive. We all just want the chain to be decentralized, because if you hold it, you hold value in Nano by default. And then if you hold value in Nano, you want it to be decentralized, because otherwise there's no value to it. So yeah, I see that as a better system, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought it was interesting. We've argued about the mining, and my point is, while I do think, you know, mining centralization certainly can be a concern, and I've talked about before on the show, the BCH community is in an interesting situation, because on one hand, we're sort of protected by the umbrella of the BTC community, and all the money and investment and stuff that they're doing is great. For us, it benefits us the same, so it's brilliant. And we don't have to do anything about it. But it's also the case that because we are a minority of the hash rate, and also a minority of the marketing clout, and a minority of the investment money and so forth, the minority of the fees paid to miners, we also don't have the clout at this moment in time to influence anything in the mining. So mining is currently kind of going in the wrong direction, where it's getting a bit centralized. Bitcoin Mechanic has looked into this, and there is a lot of problems with that. But we're just kind of like, well, you guys need to fix it, because you're the ones with all the money and all the clout, which you love telling us about. So it's kind of your problem to fix. But then at the same time, they can't fix it, because they're too deluded with how many, you know, weird ideas they have about Bitcoin and all this stuff that they don't understand. So we're kind of stuck. Like, the problem, there is a problem, and it's getting worse, but we can't fix it, and they could fix it, but they also can't fix it. Because they're not, you know, aware enough, right? So anyway, that is to say that the BCH community is a weird spot with this, and I'm not going to say that, you know, mining is totally perfect, but at the same time, I take quite a bit of stock in the fact that BTC, despite its many problems, is the number one coin, and there's a variety of reasons for that. But if proof of work was a huge problem, it would be starting to drag it down. And I mean, even when you look at the other coins, like ETH is number 2, it's now proof of stake, but it was proof of work for many years. And even if you look at let's see, like what's on the top of the list today, like even once you filter out stable coins and things that are running on other chains, okay, Solana, Ripple, no, but Dogecoin is proof of work at number 8. Then you've got Toncoin, I guess that's not Cardano, Shiba Inu, which is not even a coin, Avalanche, Bitcoin Cash, proof of work. You have Litecoin still at number 20, Monero. Like the proof of work, old school chains holding up pretty well in a field that is mostly not proof of work, right? So the market certainly seems to recognize that this idea of sort of thermodynamically linking your money to somebody having done real energy expenditure as very valuable. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so I think it's two things. So I think first of all, it's if we take out Bitcoin itself from that list, then obviously proof of stake is sort of all the Bitcoins, right? And I wonder to what extent it's the proof of work in Bitcoin, and to what extent it's the sort of the first mover advantage and the name that it has. Sorry, I need to take a sip for a second. My voice is...
Yeah. No, well, but that's kind of partly my point, that it's literally not just, even if you take out BTC, like there's still a long list of coins there, and proof of stake is not like trouncing proof of work by any means in the top 30.
Yeah, fair enough. I honestly think people will be kind of late in seeing this whole centralization problem with proof of work. So I actually also think there's two different kinds of proof of work. There's the ASIC proof of work and the like ASIC resistant proof of work, because I'm not sure about Litecoin actually. I think I talked about this with Litecoin Underground, whether it's ASIC proof of work or ASIC resistant. I think it's also ASIC. But like if you have ASICs, I think if we think about it fundamentally, there are going to be economies of scale, right? I don't think anyone disagrees with that. I think even most within the Bitcoin community will agree. It's also kind of hard to disagree because the big mining firms themselves like proudly announce a merger to further expand their economies of scale. You had like Hut 8 merging with US Bitcoin, I think it was. And they were saying like, yeah, our sole reason is economies of scale. Like we just get bigger, then we get better deals. Like we can save on administrative stuff. So I think if we agree there are economies of scale, which play out in a bunch of different ways, right? You can have access to cheaper capital. You can buy ASICs in bulk. You have cheaper rack space, cheaper maintenance, all that kind of stuff. If we agree there are economies of scale, then the big miners are going to make more profit. I think that's a very simple sort of statement to make. I don't think that is very controversial. I think most research also shows that. And then what is the sort of counterweight to that? Because if the big miners make the most profit, they can reinvest the most, grow more. They have every incentive to grow more. So like, why would it not centralize over time? And if we think it is centralizing, why would that not be a bad thing in the long run? Because to me, Bitcoin's value comes from decentralization. And if we end up with one or just a few parties that can censor the chain or mine empty blocks or whatever we want to call it, that is very bad for Bitcoin. And the fact that it's not reflected in the price yet either means that people think Bitcoin can solve it somehow, which I don't see how, or people just literally don't understand this problem yet, which, to be honest, is my take on it. I think that's kind of the case. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you think, to be honest.
Well, I'm not as concerned about it, because while I said before, yes, it is definitely a problem, but I don't think it's just as this sort of simplistic setup of, okay, power like concentrates, efficiencies of scale, and therefore everything will just merge into one on a long enough time frame, right? You could say the same thing about militaries and countries. You could say the same thing about companies in an economy. Like, why hasn't the entire world centralized onto one megacorp like some dystopian science fiction? Why hasn't the world all just become under the ruler of one, global political power? And you can't really say, well, that hasn't been long enough yet, because we've had all of human history and it hasn't happened, right? The reason is because political power and geography, honestly, is distributed, as is the kind of balance of incentives, that the bigger one option gets, the more incentive there is for somebody to create a starkly different alternative, right? And that's just a sort of fact of the world. And you can see that in some respects in Bitcoin mining as well too, where stranded energy and energy sources around the world are distributed. It's not like there's one place that is the best place in the world for energy and everything just flows out of that one spot. If there was, that would be, a really big problem. But there's some places where solar is great. There's some places where geothermal is great. There's a whole scheme of different political regimes and subsidies that they do. China announces that they're banning Bitcoin every 6 months to try and FUD the local economy, but then they also have tons of hash rate. So who knows, what deals are being done there, right? So Bitcoin to me is designed to survive and thrive in an environment of, unknowns, the very complicated real world that we live in. And I think the evidence is so far that that's held up pretty well. In the one case where a pool was getting to a majority with Ghash, the community then threw up a huge shit fit about it, and Ghash ended up going broke and out of business. And for many years, people have relied on that instance and still kind of say, okay, well, therefore that proves the incentives work. I don't think it goes that far. I mean, Bitcoin Mechanic, again, has done a great job doing, showing that some of the pools are already collaborating and this and that, right? So like I said, it's definitely an area that needs more investigation and more to look into. But at the same time, I do feel like not really the market has spoken, but things are more complicated than just everything merges into one. Even if it's just the fact that as crypto gets bigger and bigger, there's going to be all kinds of countries, in fact, they may be already are, who are willing to mine at a loss just so that they have some political hold on having some Bitcoin mining inside their own economy. And political power is distributed just like energy is. And so between those two things, I kind of have enough faith that the balance of power, such as it is, no pun intended, will remain solid enough, especially in the case where it can be in a BCH model, right? In a BTC model, the problem is that not everybody is transacting on a day-to-day basis, interacting directly with the chain. So, I mean, you end up how we've seen it with MicroStrategy and everything like that. But in a world, let's say, with several billion end consumers that are using BCH every single day, that puts the incentive of everyone, if this fucks up, everyone's business is screwed everywhere. That's the whole point. The amount of people that would be inconvenienced and stuff would be so enormous, and so many countries, it would be such an overriding issue if it became a problem, that since everybody is constantly crazily battling to keep their place in the system, it will be decentralized enough in practice. At least that was the theory of Satoshi, or the hope, I guess. And so far, it's actually played out pretty well. So that's why I feel like even if the argument makes sense that you're making, I don't think the real world evidence is in, because I think it's too simple to say, okay, people just don't understand it. In the future, they're all going to wake up to it. I think actually time has shown that by and large, the world's a bigger, more complicated place than we expect. Even something like as simple as the production of ASICs, I take ASICs to be a very good thing, not a bad thing. And people have these arguments about the ASIC resistant chains and all that. But I'm not a big believer in a lot of that, because I think there's not really, an ASIC just means an application specific integrated circuit. It just means something you cared about enough to make a chip specifically for it. So chains that are so-called ASIC resistant, they aren't ASIC resistant. They're just too small that nobody has sat down and done the engineering to make an ASIC and produced it to, run exactly their algorithm in the most optimal way. And then if they have a counter argument like, oh, okay, we have a rotating series of algorithms or something like that, that's even worse, because now your attack surface is massive, that if it rotates onto an algorithm that somebody already has a huge, pack of chips ready to jump on, then you're even more fucked, not to mention how technically complicated and likely to end up with backdoors in your cryptography or whatever that is. So that, ASIC specialization is just the nature of capitalism, and that's expressed very purely in Bitcoin. So I like that you have ASICs. The fact that ASICs are very hard to produce in bulk is not the weakness of the system. It's actually its strength, right? That as long as this hardware is somewhat distributed around the world, you need to physically control a certain set of those ASICs or produce them, which is super difficult to do. And at any time, everyone's always scrambling to do that, and nobody's completely clear who has how many ASICs where, So for all those reasons, I'm just not persuaded that Nano is going to rise. I've got other issues with Nano, which we can maybe get to in a second, but just that's on the mining front. I can't see other coins rising up to take over Bitcoin just on this issue of perceived centralization.
Yeah, I think the ASIC point we mostly agree, actually, because I think if you have ASIC resistance, like Monero, for example, it sounds great, right? People cannot use the ASICs. The issue is it means that every regular computer could be used for an attack. So like, I think for Monero, when I did the math, it was like 1 million computers you would need to attack the network, maybe less even, actually. Like, that's fairly easy to get to, even with a botnet or like a government or whatever. And because they will still be useful afterwards as well. So you don't need to buy ASICs, which will then become worthless. You can just rent already existing stuff and then use that to attack, kill the chain, and then go back to regular life. So I kind of agree with you. I think ASIC resistance might have even more issues than just ASIC proof of work. I think what to me is the weaker argument is the diseconomies of scale. So you were describing how sort of we don't have one global government and one global like megacorp, whatever. But I think that's largely because, as you described, like geography and everything, there are also diseconomies of scale, because it's hard for a central government in, I don't know, China to also control the entire American mainland, just because at some point distance catches up with you, cultural differences. There's like a ton of reasons that it's hard to keep control over a big area or to centralize that much power in one place. But I don't think that's the case for Bitcoin, because it's just such a clear commodity. Like, distance doesn't really matter because it's all at light speed. It doesn't matter where you place stuff. Culture doesn't matter. Nothing matters except pure hash rate. And that is relatively easy to optimize for with the ASICs, which you were talking about the production. I think that might actually be another issue. I don't know what the distribution is now, but Bitmain was producing like 70% maybe of all ASICs. They actually built a backdoor into their ASICs at one point, where I'm like, okay, this should have been a very big red flag to sort of make sure the production of these ASICs is decentralized a bit more. But so to me, the issue is, even if we don't see it centralizing to one entity, I think we agree the incentives are there for the big miners. And even if it becomes fewer and fewer miners, it becomes a lot easier to get those few to collude than to get 100 different ones to collude, which Satoshi's original idea of one CPU, one vote, I think was beautiful. And I think if that's the way it ended up working, it would work great. Like, just like if you had ASIC resistant algorithms and everyone in the world was using this crypto and mining this crypto, it would be super difficult to attack, just because everyone would be running it on their own computer. And I think in your ideal scenario where everyone in the world is using Bitcoin Cash, also it would be relatively hard to attack. I still don't think regular people would be able to mine, just because you need the economies of scale. But the sort of fewer people would be incentivized to attack. Although the incentive to attack would also be huge, because if it's like the entire global economy runs on a specific coin, you can make a lot of money from attacking that coin successfully. Like if you go short on the coin and you can prove it's insecure, you can perform an empty block attack, then it's going to plummet in value, and there's like a ton of value to be extracted. But I feel like the weak argument in all of this is saying when we get to a global level where all the governments are mining this coin, then we have sufficient competition between governments to ensure. And I feel like that is very wishful thinking in many ways. Like we can say that about any coin, any consensus algorithm, anytime. It's like if you get to a global level, yes, it becomes a lot harder to attack. I think the issue is getting to that global level in the first place, because as it stands now, we do see Bitcoin's hash rate centralizing to fewer entities. And yes, there is stranded energy, but it's like a very small percentage of the total hash rate. I think this is something I got from the Litecoin Underground guy, who I'm not sure where he got it from, but if you just use the public companies in the US mining Bitcoin, which is just a few, you already get to like 20-25% hash rate. And that's like the lower estimates. Like when they did research on figuring out how many entities it would take to get to 51% hash rate, they said the lower end of their estimate was 50. Like the sort of best case scenario. In their worst case scenario, it would be a lot lower, but they said they couldn't really be sure because the miners try and spread themselves out between different pools to sort of hide their true size. So I think the risk is not in the globally adopted by every country everywhere scenario. The risk is way closer in the future, where in a few years you have another halving and rewards drop even further. You have even fewer entities that you would need to get to collude. And at the same time, you have big incentives to attack with a high market cap, with big financialization of Bitcoin. So it's like relatively easy to go short and to profit from a decline. So I feel like, yes, we can say if we get to the global level, maybe this is not such an issue anymore. But I think like we can say the same about Nano. Like if Nano gets to a global level, it becomes very hard to attack. But also Nano is already hard to attack now because you would need to buy up a majority, and then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot because you're the big holder of value in Nano. Whereas with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, there's no need to be a big holder of the token, of the network, to be able to attack it, right? You can have the ASICs, which you can like, I don't know, bribe, coerce, do something with, build in a backdoor, attack the network, don't be holding any coins, and profit from a decline in price. And that to me is the big risk. I can see the argument for the global scale, and like if you have governments competing. I just don't think we'll ever get to that before it becomes too centralized and too easy to attack. To be fair, I also don't know if it's something we're ever going to agree on. I know you just have a different opinion on it. I'll be honest, I hope that you're right. I hope it never happens, because it is a far easier future if like Bitcoin Cash actually preferably solves these issues and is able to grow to this global scale. That is a far easier world than like Nano. Actually, this rank 400 coin is what's going to be the sort of answer. But realistically, to me, every time I look into this, the more I look into it, the less convinced I get of Bitcoin having a long-term future. But I'm probably biased there as well.
I mean, when you're saying this, global scenario, I mean, I was just bringing that up as one part of I sort of see it as, the other way around, where you're right, that's a hypothetical in the future. So then if we're not going to talk about the hypothetical, then we have to talk about the current reality, which is that for 16 years, people have been hating on Bitcoin and saying it was going to not work and blah, blah, blah with every kind of thing. But so far, it's just done better and better and better, even to the extent that it got hijacked. BCH survived. BTC still pumped loads of money into crypto. Like, it's because it's essentially the same argument as like politically, people said for many years, oh, well, BTC or Bitcoin will get big enough and then it'll get banned and then the government attack will come. But it's kind of like a perfect scale where when it's small, it's not really big enough to worry about, so nobody tries to fuck around with it. And then the bigger it gets, the more resistant it is because there's more people invested in it, and it's like correlates, you know. So that's how Bitcoin has survived essentially through all the misdemeanors and problems here and there. At the end of the day, Bitcoin is still fine, right? And I feel like mining is kind of the same. So up until now, we haven't got to a point where it's all centralized and it's game over and people are attacking the network. So clearly something is working, right? So I feel like the burden of proof is kind of on you to show that it's got a critical vulnerability rather than Bitcoiners to argue that it doesn't because it's been working for 16 years, you know?
Yeah, I like that is a fair argument, right? Like if it hasn't gone wrong in 16 years, then like why would it suddenly now? But I also feel like the only reason we feel this way is because the price has been going up. Because I feel like in many other metrics, most people would agree it's not going the right direction. Like if you look into the mining pools, I think most would say, okay, mining pools are definitely centralizing. If you look into pure hash rate, most would say, okay, hash rate is definitely centralizing. If you look at security budget as like a percentage of market cap, that's going down. If you look at ASIC production, people are like, yeah, that's pretty centralized. So I feel like the price distracts us too much from what is happening to actually like, so that we think maybe, yes, everything is okay. Whereas all the underlying, if we look back in 10 years and be like, okay, where did this go wrong? People will be like, it was super obvious. Like we could see the pool centralizing. We could see the miners centralizing. We had the Ghash scare and then we let the pools get big again. We had the backdoor scare from like Bitmain, but then, I don't know, we forgot about it. I kind of feel like we're glossing over a lot just because the price has been pumping, which like is a fair, like the price is a fair argument, right? Because it reflects a lot of information, all that, and why would we be smarter than the people who invest a total of like 1 trillion in there? But I feel like a lot of the warning signs are here, and they're just like being hidden behind this very nice green high price. That is sort of my fear in all this.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with you. My response to that is the total cop out, which is what I said before, which is that's the BTC community's problem. You know, give us the 1 trillion market cap, and then let me tell you, we'll be on this show sorting out the fucking mining industry and blah, blah, blah. But as it stands, I can't even get Bitcoin Mechanic to talk to me about this, the number one guy who cares about it and is fruitlessly battling away. I'm trying to help him actually make some wins with what he's trying to do, but he won't even fucking talk to me or listen to me no matter what I say. So I can't, my hands are tied.
At least he's looking into it, right? That's something.
Well, that's right. I'm glad that he's looking into it, but it's like what's the right phrase? It's like some kind of clown show or something going on over there. You're like, well, I'm glad you guys are trying, but it could be like 100 times more effective if you had a better methodology. But then they could just point at us and say the same thing. Well, if you're so smart, why aren't you just out competing us and blowing us out of the water? We're not there yet, but we're getting there. We're getting there, and that's another thing I just wanted to touch on. I mean, firstly, you said about the sort of Nano was essentially proof of stake, right? That if there's no inflation and whoever has the fattest stack can kind of dictate the consensus, right? So then what's the story there? Does Nano Foundation have a majority? What's the...
So when I actually quite like, this is episode 134, I think, right? Yes. So 133 million Nano were created initially. So I was like, I am one episode too late. But 133 million Nano were created at Genesis, it's called. So the first sort of block. That's all the Nano there ever will be because there's no inflation and whatever. And those were distributed like 7 million Nano. I think it's 7, might be 5 million Nano. Went to the Nano Foundation, essentially a developer fund, which was about like 5% of the supply either way, went to the Nano Foundation, and then the other 95% was distributed to anyone who would solve CAPTCHAs. So essentially Colin Lemahieu, it's a very difficult name, the founder of Nano, Colin, he essentially did not want to distribute via an ICO because then only the people who have money can get the coins, which seems very unfair to the vast majority of the world. And he also didn't want to do proof of work because many people in many countries don't have good enough hardware to mine, so then they would have no chance to get it. So what he did instead was he used captchas, like click all the trains or whatever pictures, or click the cats. And if you solved enough of those, like every hour they would distribute some nano to whoever solved captchas, essentially. So that was the initial distribution. So like 126 million nano was distributed that way, 7 million nano to the developer fund. That developer fund is completely empty now. It has been empty for, I want to say, about 2 years, 1.5, 2 years, just because they used it to pay salaries of developers, but no real new money came into the developer fund, so it ran out. So now the Nano Foundation as well is completely volunteer driven. They don't pay any salaries. They don't have any funds. It's just a bunch of people working on it in their free time. So yeah, that's the way it works now. The fat stack part, not so much. There are some bigger holders of Nano, obviously, like you have whales in every community. I try to be in touch with them because I sometimes think it would be nice to set up some marketing initiatives. So I've actually created sort of a group where I can talk to all those people and like propose, maybe we can do this. But the founder is not, like, he does not seem to be a whale, oddly enough. He works an actual full-time job nowadays because he doesn't get paid anymore by the Nano Foundation. And like by all accounts, it seems like he didn't keep a lot for himself. Otherwise, I don't see why he would also be working. He still works on Nano a lot. Like, I don't know. I feel like he just does 2 full-time jobs essentially. But yeah, that's kind of the story behind how it was distributed and how it works now.
Yeah, okay. So there's no, well, it sounds like there's no real proof that, well, you might be even more fucked than the Bitcoin miners. You might have 2 whales with 25% each who are just like got a hotline to each other, and any time they could just rug the whole thing, I guess. But
like, technically it would be possible, right? Like, it's hard to say because it's all pseudo-anonymous. There's this, if you search for site reddit.com distribution visualize or something, there's like a visualization of how the initial distribution went, which seems to have gone very normal and doesn't seem to be just a few people, but it is pseudo-anonymous, so you never know. But then I would say if you do hold such a big amount of Nano, first of all, like, that's like balls of steel to hold that for all of these years. But second of all, I guess those people would have the most incentive to make sure they actually don't centralize it, or they don't censor it or whatever, because the ones that they would be hurting most is themselves in a way.
you could say that about the Bitcoin miners, though. So that's just like the same.
Well, not entirely,
argument.
right? Because if I'm a Bitcoin miner, I can still go short on the chain and be like, okay, these ASICs I write off because they're worth, I don't know, 5 billion, but I can go short on 50 billion worth of Bitcoin and make a bigger profit that way. So
kind of
for
short Nano and then fuck it with the proof of stake.
Yeah, like you could try, but then if you also hold Nano, like you need to hold Nano to be able to attack it sufficiently, right? So
how's that different to holding the ASICs? I'm not following this part. The ASICs cost a lot of money to get, so it's the same as buying a lot of Nano, right?
Well, in a way, so like the ASICs, the total investment in ASICs now is like on the order of about 10 billion, 10, 20 billion maybe. And the total market cap of Bitcoin is like, what is it now? $1 trillion, I think.
I see.
Like, you could totally write off your complete amount of ASICs and still profit from the decrease in price by going short, or some like financial instrument where you profit from a price decline. Whereas if you need to have the coins to attack the chain, that becomes a lot harder. Like, this is not unique to Nano. It's for all proof of stake coins, I guess.
But if you had a leveraged market, it wouldn't matter anyway, right? You can do the same thing, 10 billion against, whatever, just leveraged enough. It just seems like details really to me.
But so you would, okay, so to attack Nano, you would need, let's say, 50% of all Nano, right? It's hard to get a much bigger short position than 50% of the total market cap, I would say.
True.
So like maybe it is still possible to an extent, but the sort of percent, like, it just becomes a lot harder to do this in a profitable way. Like, Nano can be attacked, obviously. Like, people could try and buy up like millions and millions of Nano, like please try and do so. Like it will finally cause the price increase that we think is necessary for Nano to become more well known. But yeah, it's just a far more difficult way to attack. Like if you had to, I think like the better comparison is, do you think Bitcoin is harder to attack based just on the ASICs, or if you had to hold 50% of all Bitcoin? And
I actually think it's harder to attack based on the ASICs. I mean, and again, this is something that I think that probably needs a lot more discussion about in crypto, but I always see these arguments by these Ethereum people. I've said before on the show, Justin Drake has this absolutely bullshit number or self-rationalizing that he does, where he says ETH is 20 times more economically secure, and he has these like numbers, and like that doesn't mean anything, because proof of work and proof of stake are different. Proof of stake you can attack with one laptop, one nerd, and the Federal Reserve's money printer. You cannot do that with Bitcoin. Like we said before, with the proof of work, you have to actually, you need the US military, and even that might not be good enough, right? So it's a very different ball game, because you're operating in meat space with a proof of work coin, right?
So I would say if I had the money printer and like unlimited money to spend, I would buy up the ASIC manufacturer, or just literally outbid anyone who is bidding for these ASICs. But
at a certain point you can't do that. Like, so they can just, if China has 50% of the hash rate, they can just be like, "Fuck you, we're not selling," right?
But
I
why
guess
would
that's the
China
same
care?
thing in Bruce said. Well, maybe the politics of the world. They're watching the USD hyperinflate and all of America go bankrupt in the process. So maybe that's worth more to them than selling some ASICs, you know?
I would say if you have unlimited money, it would be super easy to just buy up whatever you need to. Like, for example, we have some public mining companies that mine Bitcoin now, right? And we have sort of knowledge of where a majority of the hash rate is, like, or what companies own it in a way. I'm pretty sure like the shareholders of those companies, if you offered them like twice or triple or four times the value of their entire company, they would say like, yeah, dude, like be my guest. I quite like this Bitcoin idea, but I'm not that sold on it. Like that to me is sort of this, it just sounds easier than buying up. Like it's hard to even have 50% of the supply available for sale, I think, for like coins. I think that's spread over so many people. I don't know if there's 50% available on exchanges. I don't know for Ethereum. I don't know for Nano. But like that would skyrocket in price way quicker, I think, than with ASICs. All you need to do is like there's 3 ASIC manufacturers, I think. Bitmain, if you offer them 100 billion for their $10 billion company, I feel like they'd probably say yes. Like they'd be like, oh, this is a pretty good deal. Like there's no way we can say no to this and go back to the shareholders and be like, sorry guys, we think we can get a better deal. I don't know.
But if then there's one other element though, that the proof of work, you have the nuclear option as well too. You can brick the proof of work. You can switch the proof of work if it is that scenario. You can switch to another algorithm, which would be a horrendous change. It would have a huge problem, but you could do it. Whereas proof of stake, if they've bought up 50% of the coins, any fork that you make, you're still going to be trapped with, they're going to have 50% of the coins on any fork, unless you were somehow deleting people's coins. And if they've just spread out their coins, you would never know which were the coins keeping you locked in, I assume. I don't know. I have to think through that scenario.
I was going to say, I think that you could kind of do, right? Like roll back to the chain where you can see who is like censoring transactions, right? It's not like you can see which coins are censoring the transactions at least, or which nodes with which voting power. Just like, I'm not sure if in Bitcoin you could see you could see where I don't know if you could see who is mining the empty blocks actually. So I don't know if you could use the same sort of reasoning. But yeah, you could. I think that's like the nuclear option, the worst case option. In proof of stake, you would need to roll back to some version where they don't have the coins yet, or do a fork where you essentially say these coins no longer participate in consensus, it would
the
be
slashing.
terrible.
It's
like
trying to
yeah,
slash like
it would
more
be
than
super
50% of
pain.
your supply. Yeah.
Exactly, it would be super painful. But I also think it would be super painful to change algorithm, because first
Yeah,
of
of
all, the
course it would.
question
Yeah, you're starting again from scratch. Who
you're
knows what
starting from
algorithm you've got?
scratch.
Yeah.
Yeah, with like zero security in a way, but also like how do you even determine what the new
Yeah.
algorithm is going to be? Like you cannot base it on hash rate. You also cannot base it on pure node count, because that can be Sybil attacked fairly easily. Like how
Maybe
do
you
you
just
even
switch
get
over
to
to Litecoin. Maybe you just go, Litecoin has script. We're switching over to script, but with the
Yeah.
UTXO set from like BCH. I don't know. It would be interesting. Anyway, yeah. I feel like we're just we're getting way
yeah.
way too
It's an
theoretical at
interesting
this point. This
discussion,
is
but I don't know if all the audience finds it as interesting
Yeah.
as we do.
I think this is a good segment for us to do, but I also don't want to go all night just on this topic. But anyway, all that is to say that we can always just wait and see how the market sort of plays it out, and everyone can invest in whatever they think is gonna work, and I guess reality will prove in the end.
Yeah.
So.
No, I just wanted
don't
to
know.
add one thing. I just want to say,
Yeah.
like, I would much prefer if other crypto like just solve this problem. It's not that I'm married to Nano. I think it's the best solution. I think it's worth like having a few dollars in there. But like, I would much prefer if Bitcoin solves its issues, if Bitcoin Cash can profit from that, just because it's a much easier fight, and the end goal is decentralized money, right? I think that's the part we can all agree on.
Yeah. Well, let's speaking of that, then let's get a little bit onto that. So I've got a slide here with joining BCH. So I said, quote, this was interesting from July of 2023. So almost, I guess, a year and a half ago, really, where we were arguing about the mining, similar to the stuff we just said. But I said, quote, great thread. Mira Hurley is one step from joining Bitcoin Cash, understands the mission, the importance, the community, BTC failures, scaling plan and viability. Just one thing missing: drive to play for the winning team. It'll come. End quote. And then I was quoting you talking about how you were understanding about the big blocks and how it was going to fund everything. So what you just said there about that's another problem I find in the Nano community is it's not maximalist enough. You need maximalists to win, right? It's like playing on a sports team. The star players are the maximalists. You don't have enough star players in the big leagues. You just can't win. It's just the reality. The maximalists are the ones who make 140 episodes of the Bitcoin Cash podcast and not the generic crypto chat, show. Yeah. They're the ones who write the node protocol stuff. They're the ones who start businesses that just do that and only that, and you can go to that, and they network amongst each other. So the network effect of that compound, like a lot of the guys I work with are also just all in on BCH, and that's great. We never have to argue about, are we using this coin or that coin, Like with NanoGPT, that was a huge bullish sign for Nano, because you started it was Nano only, but then now you've added the other coins. The upside is you've got more exposure and marketing to other communities, but the downside is once you've opened that door, maybe you're introducing Nano to other people, or maybe you're introducing Nano users to other coins. Do you have any thoughts on that element of it?
Yeah. I think it's a fair point. I think it's a different vibe maybe in the Nano community, where people prefer not to be maximalists, but prefer to see it as like, if there's like, we think Nano works best, we think in a free market it will do best, just because we see it as the best medium of exchange, the best store of value, and we're open to criticism, we're open to changing our mind, because we feel like it sounds very sort of I don't know, they go low, we go high, or whatever. But I think it's because many people believe so strongly in Nano that they think it can withstand criticism, it can withstand exposure to other crypto, and that like in the long run it is what's going to win out. All it needs is more people trying it out, more attention to it, more sort of visibility. So I also call myself not a maximalist, right? Because I am very open to other chains being the better solution. I just, in my what is it now, 5-6 years, haven't been able to find anything. So it's this, yeah, I don't know how to describe it, but I don't think maximalism works best in the Nano community. I think none of the people in Nano would describe themselves as real maximalists, but more as, we think Nano is the best option. Show me something different, I'll change, but I haven't found it yet, so I'll stick with Nano, which is also kind of our take on this. We have more coins on NanoGPT because I believe in allowing people to, choose for themselves what they want to use. If that is Nano, great. If it's Bitcoin Cash, great. If it's Litecoin, great. As I said earlier, we just want to have decentralized money that actually works. We think Nano is the best solution. We think NanoGPT exposes more people to Nano, also exposes more people to other crypto. That's totally fine. It's in the long run, I think we will trend towards what is the best actual solution for medium of exchange and store of value. And the more I can get people to think about the different options, compare them, try them out, that's fine by me. Maybe they find something I missed, but I don't think so. So I don't see the harm in sort of not being one coin only. Also, to be honest, from a practical perspective, far more people are willing to try a service if it supports the coin that they already have. If we stuck with just Nano, that is a small group in a way. It is our biggest user group, obviously, but like you limit yourself in a lot of ways, right? So also as a business, it's just hard to, until we get to a big enough level for any crypto, I think we would have the same issue if we were purely Bitcoin Cash or purely Litecoin, purely Monero. It's just hard to, harder to get a business done that way.
But this is my point, right? Like what you're saying is very mature, it's very reasonable, and it's very pragmatic, but it's not a winning strategy, if you see what I'm saying, right? You don't have, like, there's a reason that BTC is the biggest coin, and one of the reasons is that it just has a huge bunch of like religious fanatically zealots that are just all in on BTC, and people who are a bit wishy-washy, who are kind of like, we'll add your coin. The BTC maximalists won't add your coin. They'll just tell you to fuck off. And as a result, that kind of keeps the competition down, and it makes their networking and network effect very powerful. And then ETH is the second biggest coin, probably because it also has the second most amount of religiously zealous people who spend all day on Twitter. Gosh, they're worse than BTC, to be honest, in that respect. Like the amount of self-rationalizing that they do. ETH is ultrasound money, and then one BTC guy posts their like graph like down and to the right, and they never have a response. I honestly, they do get them sometimes there. But you see what I'm saying, right? It's not about whether. Yeah, it's obviously the most mature and adult thing to say, okay, well, we'll just use whatever works, but you can't compete with that attitude against people who are like all in my way or the highway.
Right. So the reason I still prefer that over my way or the highway is that in the end, to me, that kind of comes back to our earlier conversation. I think it matters less what we say and how toxic we are or how inclusive we are. It's more about the underlying fundamentals of the chain. And I think in many ways, those in Bitcoin have to be this toxic and have to be this sort of completely against anyone checking out anything else, because they know they cannot compete in a free market. Whereas my feeling with Nano, and the way many others in Nano feel, is we are totally fine with people checking out other stuff because we're like secure enough to think in the long run, this is what's going to work out. Like, no matter how sort of toxic other people will be, it's just not a good solution. And there is only so much you can argue or try and stomp down other people if your coin doesn't actually work, or if your coin is becoming insecure. So yeah, it's a very different philosophy, I think. But I think the toxicity doesn't come from a position of strength. It comes from a position of weakness, is my take, to be honest.
I mean, I agree with you. I agree with you about the toxic part, but I think there's a difference. The toxicity is related to, but it's not the core of what I'm saying, which is conviction. You need conviction toxicity is superfluous. It happens that the BTC guys G themselves up for their conviction through this toxicity. But what I try and encourage in the BCH community is conviction, like on this show. Obviously it's the Bitcoin Cash podcast. We have guests from all different cryptos, and I'm happy to debate absolutely anyone because I agree with you. The only reason I wouldn't is if I thought that they were going to just wreck me and, the whole coin would fall apart or something. Like that's not something I'm worried about. But you do have to have conviction, and like you said, wouldn't it be hard to run a business if you were just all in on BCH? Well, in Nano it might be, but on BCH it isn't, or at least it isn't any more hard than anything else, because while you trade off that you don't have necessarily an audience of those other coins, on the other hand you get the two huge benefits, which is that one, all the BCH community will pile in on your thing because they also are quite BCH only a lot of the time, not always.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, once you get into the BCH community, it's not just the end consumers, it's also the BCH community itself. Like you saw that you said, okay, we're going to add BCH, and instantly the BCH community was open-minded and you got a lot of traction. But it's like that with everything in BCH. All the BCH sort of insiders, such as it is, or all the most committed people in BCH, all have a mega strong network effect because for giving each other tips and advice and helping each other and doing conferences and whatever, everything just works. Everybody's just on the same page, by default, right? And that's why BCH, I think, has a chance to win, and Nano doesn't, essentially.
But would you say that those BCH people then wouldn't be supportive of NanoGPT, for example, because we not only have BCH but also other coins?
No, it's not that they won't be supportive. It's just that they won't be as supportive.
Yeah.
You can come on this show and talk to, that's great. But if you said NanoGPT is going BCH only, I would start linking you up like nobody's business, So that's it. It's kind of the BCH community shouldn't be closed off. Obviously, we want to build, connections wherever we can. That's just obvious. But the strongest connection of the network effect is always going to be flowing among the people who are most aligned, right?
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. I think there is a trade-off there for any community, right? Because I think also within the Nano community, we would have been more popular within the Nano community if we stayed with Nano only. And your reasoning for Bitcoin Cash community also makes sense. But to be honest, I think the advantage to having that one coin only is smaller than the advantage of having many different coins, just in a very practical sense. But then again, you would say, that's the pragmatism, which is not going to make it win. I think, on the other hand, the advantage to Nano of us doing this is we accept many different coins. We even accept credit cards, right? But what that means when we also convert our profits to Nano is it's actually a far bigger buying pressure on Nano and far more people getting to know about Nano than would have been the case if we kept it Nano only. If we kept it Nano only, it would have been fantastic within the community, but you're reaching the existing enthusiasts. Whereas this way, we reach even people in fiat and we reach people in other coin communities. And at the end of the day, our profits go into Nano. So it's a way to make it visible to more people. It's a way to get more money flowing into Nano. And if what we have to give up for that is the sort of maximalism, I don't know what you want to call it, but if what we have to give up,
you can call it maximalism. I just see, toxic maximalism to me is corruption
an entirely
of the
different thing.
Maximalism. Yeah.
It's
not entirely different. It's like a mutated strain. It's like a messed up cousin or something. Rather than
No, that's fair enough. Because if that's it's always a definition question as well, right? I am a maximalist in some ways, in the sense that I think it's the best solution. I am not a maximalist in the sense that I would say I think that there cannot be anything else that's better, just because I used to feel that way about Bitcoin and I don't anymore. And Nano is the best I've been able to find, but who knows, right? It's I don't know. I would feel bad picking any tech, anytime, anywhere, where I'm I am convinced this is the thing forever. So that's kind of why, I don't know, why I might maybe feel slightly different about this and why.
Yeah.
What,
So what
sorry?
I ask guests on this show then sometimes is, and we'll move on from this in just a moment, is so what would it take? What would convince you that BCH was the one? We were going to go to global reserve currency. We were going to get billions of users, and it was time to like just quit everything else and all in on BCH. What real world evidence, or would you need to see to be convinced of that?
So I think if BCH moved to zero fee, no, I'm just kidding. I think, frankly, for me, the biggest thing I have that's stopping me from holding value in BCH, because I do use it as a medium of exchange. The biggest thing stopping me from keeping value in there is the sort of long-term security thing that we talked about earlier. That is my biggest fear for BCH and Bitcoin, because I think in this sense they are very similar. If I could see that the long-term decentralization was sort of not guaranteed, it can never be guaranteed, but if that started making sense to me, that would be the most important part to me. Also, like, obviously more network effect and stuff, that would all help. But the part I am most concerned with, and that at the same time keeps me tied to Nano most strongly, is the decentralization and the store of value aspect. So yeah, that would be
Yeah.
my answer.
Good answer. Bitcoin Out Loud says we need a Bitcoin Cash podcast FAQ. What is maximalism? What is toxic maximalism? What is toxic maximalism? Well, you can go to bitcoincashpodcast.com/FAQs and you'll find right there an FAQ exactly about that. What is Bitcoin maximalism, which has all the details of that. So for anybody who's interested in diving into that rabbit hole, I've got some examples there, some context of the history and so forth for the show's
Nice.
position on that issue. Okay, all right. Maybe just quickly then, we're already over time, but let's just touch on this quickly because I think this is kind of interesting and you're so deep on all the Twitter stuff that I think you might have a good take. BCH recently has been making some gains with the BTC community, admitting more and more that BCH got things right. Instead of saying these shitcoiners, these stupid idiots, price graph, they've started saying like, wait a second, these guys actually made some good stuff, and like they're ahead of us, guys. We got to pay attention to this, which is, as I've been predicting on the show, increasingly we're just watching the slow slide into BCH was right the whole time, right? But then at the same time, you have the BTC community have got into this ossification debate amongst themselves where, like we're saying, there's a segment of their community that refuses to even acknowledge that there could be any issues, or they say that, if they change something, that's actually defeating the point, because the point is that it can't be changed, like it's some kind of atomic element. And you have here a quote that I've got from Jamison Lopp, wrote this argument down, and he's got this in his article. Where is your stopping point for changes? When is Bitcoin good enough? We should continue improving Bitcoin until we can't. We've already seen Bitcoin improvement proposals drop off a cliff since 2017, averaging fewer than one per month since then, and many proposals don't even come with activation guidance because developers don't want to run that gauntlet. We're losing talent from protocol development as a result, which further exacerbates the slowdown. End quote. So he is basically against ossification himself, but he kind of admits like things are really trending towards we're already ossified. What do you make of this? Is BTC already ossified? Is it too late for the guys who are, desperately holding out? We're going to add CTV. We're going to do this. Are there going to be any BTC upgrades in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Frankly, I'm not very optimistic on it. I think ossification has become the whole story of Bitcoin. It ties into the whole store of value, digital gold side of it, where I think they've invested so much of their also personal capital. Just a lot of people who are big in Bitcoin are big because they've been so big on, we need to not change anything. We need to stick with what we have. It's ultimate security. It's a swarm of cyber hornets protecting this wall of impenetrable energy. So I don't think there are big chances of Bitcoin changing in any big way. Also because I think the ones that did want to make changes have already moved largely, right? I think like that's Bitcoin Cash. That's Nano was started by someone who was first in Bitcoin. Like everyone who wants to actually innovate has been moving out of Bitcoin because you cannot innovate on Bitcoin and you haven't been able to for years. So I feel like the culture within Bitcoin is just not supportive of changes. And I think every time there is someone that does want to make some changes, they get kind of ostracized. And it happens to just one or two people at a time. But what it means is in the long run, all of those people get pushed out. So it's hard to find a big enough group to make actual changes now in Bitcoin because most of those that would have been down have already left. So yeah, I'm not very positive on it. I think it would be great for Bitcoin if they made changes. And I've also been seeing the tweets where I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what the Bitcoin Cash guys did. So yeah, I definitely see the point. I just don't think it's going to happen within Bitcoin. I think it's more likely if Bitcoiners realize these are the issues with Bitcoin, I think it's more likely they move to other chains than that they will try to improve within the chain.
Spot on. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly my position. So we're in total
Yeah.
agreement on that. Okay, meme of the week. This week, this is a good one. This AAJ094 on Reddit, home of some of the most dedicated trolls, posted, "The name BCH Bull is a self-contradiction. BCH and Bull just don't go together. Don't believe me? See any price chart since 2017. Now BCH Bear might just be the thing." And then Emergent Reasons, who works with BCH Bull, posted back, "More like bchbear.com, am I right?" And that just made me crack up. And he's got the little laughing gif of the little laughing lizard here because that's just so spot on. Like, we've been trolled with this so many times that they already made a version of their product that is advertised like BCH Bear, short BCH if it's going to zero, etc. So he just already got the troll beaten before he even posted,
I've seen this once somewhere before, the BCH Bear. It's so smart.
It's a good one, yeah. It's a good one. bchbear.com. If you think we're stupid, we're all going to zero, just go make a ton of money. Just go get rich. It's right there, bchbear.com. Okay, and community comment of the week comes from Donald J. Trump, who I guess today it's now the 5th of November. We're going to be seeing the election happening pretty shortly, right? But he posted, quote, "I would like to wish our great Bitcoiners a happy 16th anniversary of Satoshi's white paper. We will end Kamala's war on crypto and Bitcoin will be made in the USA. Vote Trump, hashtag Bitcoin, hashtag Free Ross day one." On Twitter, this got more than 26 million views or something. And I think probably a lot of my audience would be more favoring towards the American Republicans at the moment. But regardless of your political stance, just this is not pretty amazing, right? Like, this is the Satoshi's white paper getting shouted out at that scale to just so many millions of people. It really just, and the more people that read the white paper, honestly, the better for Bitcoin Cash in particular. So, this is just, you absolutely love to see it, just one step at a time. In 16 years, okay, we haven't taken over the world just yet in terms of as a P2P cash, but this is not bad, right? This is some global impact right here, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of funny he shouts out the white paper. That's I hadn't even seen this. It's nice.
Yeah. Well, 31st of October, and a lot of the BTC people do it. And, whether it was him or, presumably somebody on his campaign said to him, especially because this whole thing about freeing Ross Ulbricht has been a really big point that's got him a lot more support than I think he expected. So he's leaning into that. All right, message to the community. Your chance to, we've already heard a bit your thoughts from the BCH community, but given where BCH is now, maybe how it's been trending over the last few years, how you found it interacting with NanoGPT, what does the Bitcoin Cash community need to hear?
Ooh. I think if I could give, I was actually thinking a bit about this beforehand, like what advice I would have. And I would say, as a merchant who accepts BCH, I think it would be great if BCH could get themselves onto BTC Pay server, because many merchants use it to accept payments. We do as well. And it's just easier than having a separate integration with just Bitcoin Cash, despite prompt.cash being great. And I would love to see more easy ways that people can earn little bits of Bitcoin Cash. If you have suggestions on ways this is already possible, we would love to hear, because we want to add more ways to earn BCH onto our earn page on NanoGPT. So yeah, I'd love to see more developments happening in that way as well. Aside from that, keep building that network effect. It's cool to see, and it's a great community to interact with. So I really appreciate the BCH community.
Amazing. Yeah, well, like you say, BTC Pay server, that might be a bit of an uphill battle. I have a feeling they're never going to do it. That's where the tribal warfare is at its strongest. Those guys and some of those other similar companies. It's like, why wouldn't you just add BCH? And often they will add like any coin, anything except BCH. Like they specifically hate BCH, the absolute utmost. And I think some of it's open source. Maybe somebody in the past has considered like forking and stuff. Then you have to maintain it yourself and all that. So I'm sure if it's a great solution, we'll get around to making either a BCH version or an alternative or a fork or something. But it just hasn't happened yet. But
yeah. I talked to the guy actually, and he said they would be open to adding BCH because we're adding Nano in there as well.
The gaslighting. He's Jet.
Yeah, maybe.
What's the story? What's the real facts over here?
I will see if I can find the GitHub link, but people have asked before, and there was a very clear no, fuck you and your scam coin.
Really?
We're not going to do this.
Okay.
Oh.
This was years ago too, back when the Bitcoin Cashers Discord was popping off. So probably
maybe things have
2018.
changed. If it was years ago, maybe there's a new admin or something,
I don't know. He seemed open to it, but maybe I'm wrong here. But if not, prompt.cash works really great as well. So if anyone is considering accepting Bitcoin Cash, that's the one I would recommend looking into.
Awesome. Okay, all right. We got to shout out our FundMe contributors for EPS 126 to 135. Majumali Marcelo, 2024.bcharg.com. Molecular Erdogan Talk, the economics writer. BCH Audist, LFG. Cash Stamps, biggest soundboard for BCH we have. Keep up the great job, guys. Peter Willer, I think that the goal should be and can realistically be everyone simultaneously having on-chain funds. Milton Friedman, Emergent Reasons, Stay Grounded, Stay Awesome P2P, Electronic Cash for the World. Yeah, try to get Vlad Kostia on one of these next episodes. Would be a great discussion as he's opening up. Big V and the Bitcoin Cash Tokyo gang, Bitcoin Cash Tokyo weekly meetup, session community, http://bitcoincash.tokyo, and Bitcoin Jason, I am, we're all Satoshi. Let's do our part. Thank you to our patron, Ricky. Thank you to our donators. Thank you to our sponsors. Check out bchbull.com or bchbear.com. Also highly recommended. If you're new to the show, you can listen to episode 85. You can hit up the FAQs at bitcoincashpodcast.com and try Selene Wallet at selene.cash. Okay, final shout outs for the show. So anything, obviously people can follow you on Twitter. Where else can they find you, and what else should they be looking out for?
So I guess you can find me on Twitter as @Milan_DEREEDE, which is a Dutch name, which is very difficult to understand for most people. Or check out NanoGPT.com, so NanoGPT.com, which is our Twitter account. Or if you want to try spending 10 cents of Bitcoin Cash, go to nano-gpt.com. It's a pretty cool service, I think. We have many happy Bitcoin Cash users, and you can try it out with literally 10 cents. So give it a try, give us feedback. If we can improve anything, let us know. If we can add ways to earn Bitcoin Cash, let us know. We're very open to improving further. So would appreciate it.
Awesome. Any shout outs, Jet, this week? Nope. And my shout out is going to go to the Nano community. you should all just switch to BCH and become cultish maximalists. It will be much better for you in the long run. But I think if you listen to this discussion, yeah, hopefully you've got some new points of view. But at the same time, yeah, you know, keep doing what you're doing. I guess some of the most shillish ones I've muted, so good for them. And the rest, well, you know, maybe see you on the Twitter streets.
Yeah.
All right.
I was gonna say we're all aiming for the same goal at least. So yeah, let's remember
World
that.
domination, P2P electronic cash, just like the white paper, just like Donald Trump says.
Exactly.
You know, just listen to what he has to say. Okay, all right, that'll do it for the show. Thank you everyone for listening. Until next time.
All right, thank you, man. It was fun.
Boom. Yeah.
Reports that more than 500,000 Iraqi children have died as a direct result of U.S. sanctions. It's not just theoretical. These are real people with real lives. 500,000 kids? I'm sorry for shouting, but it just disgusts me what these people's government do. And they do it through central banking and through the control of the money supply, and Bitcoin takes that away from them.
This is the sound of freedom coming out your speakers. How they playing hide and seek or finders keepers. Let me define my thesis. While they